Chapter 738. His fist was covered in 3 layers of black dragon scales. Under Wu Qi's control, the first layer of dragon scales straightened up one by one, making his fist look like tens of razor blades. Dragon scales were famous for their toughness and sharpness. Before the man's palm touched his shoulder, Wu Qi's fist landed on the man's chest. The dragon scales easily shredded the man's half-body armor, and Wu Qi's fist went straight into the man's body. The dragon scales vibrated intensely, shredding the man's heart. Puff! Wu Qi's fist came out from the man's back. Blood soaked the scales on his fist, and the black dragon scales were greedily absorbing the man's blood essence. Silently, the Inferno Hell Fiend's scripture was activated. The purgatory flame crazily extracted the man's blood essence and poured it into the dragon scales, making these dragon scales even tougher. Using the Inferno Hell Fiend's scripture to absorb the blood essence of others to strengthen one's own body was one of the evilest magics in the Inferno Hell Fiend's scripture. If Wu Qi wasn't in a fit of anger right now, and these people attacked him for no reason, he wouldn't want to use such an evil move on a stranger. The middle-aged man stared at Wu Qi in a daze. The man who attacked Wu Qi just now was the strongest general under his command. But in Wu Qi's hands, how could his strongest general be so vulnerable? Even though he was a little careless, he couldn't possibly be killed by a single punch, could he? The man's body quickly withered and decayed. Soon, he turned into a puddle of dust and dissipated in the wind. The dragon scales on Wu Qi's fist were coated with a faint layer of blood, sparkling with a dazzling blood-red light under the sunlight. Slowly deactivating the dragon kill on his fist, the dragon scales on Wu Qi's fist shrunk back into his flesh piece by piece. He coldly looked at the man in embroidered robes and shouted in a deep voice, "Your grandfather is not in a good mood right now. You better not provoke me." The man's face suddenly turned extremely unsightly. "How dare you? I'm Jiyu, king of Yangqiu. Why you are just a subordinate of third brother. How dare you speak so rudely to me? This prince will beat you to death, you thing that doesn't know the difference between superior and inferior." With a furious roar, Jiyu's body abruptly grew to about 300 feet tall. With the blood of the Longbow Kingdom in his veins, he gave a loud cry as a bizarre smile flashed across his lips. Then, he threw a punch at Wu Qi with all his might. The people of Longbow Kingdom were born with the ability to control some natural energies, and the energy Jiyu had mastered was the power of thunder. His huge fist was covered in a thick layer of lightning that looked almost tangible, as he smashed it down towards Wu Qi's head with the force of a thunderbolt. Wu Qi's chest tightened. Jiyu's punch was so powerful that even with his current overall strength, Wu Qi dared not say that he could withstand it. Jiyu was the son of King Yangshan, Ji Kuei, and a concubine from the Longbow Kingdom. The concubine came from a clan with a very high status in the Longbow Kingdom, and it could be said that she had inherited the purest bloodline of the ancient Longbow Kingdom. Therefore, Jiyu was extremely talented, and with his innate divine strength, he was able to kill a flood dragon at the age of 3. Among the 4 sons of King Yangshan, Jiyu's divine strength was the strongest, and even among the members of Dayu's imperial clan, his courage and strength were among the best. "You bastard! What makes you so great about being a prince?" After being used as bait to kill a Buddha, Wu Qi's stomach was filled with anger, and it was triggered by Gaochunli when Jiyu bumped into him. Wu Qi, who was so angry that his eyes turned black, exploded like a powder keg, and he did not care about the consequences. "Since I'm no match for you in terms of pure strength, I'll fight you with divine abilities and magic. Even if you're a prince, what are you?" Wu Qi cursed. A beam of black light darted out of the top of his head, and streams of starlight poured down from Dark Yi's celestial tower. Suddenly, the time around Wu Qi changed subtly. Jiyu performed an incantation gesture with both hands, and the flow of time around his body remained normal, but the flow of time around his fist and his shoulder became chaotic. The flow of time around his fist had reached a maximum of 100 times, and the flow of time around his forearm was only about 10 times. However, The flow of time around his arm had reached 50 times, and the flow of time around his shoulder had reached a maximum of 100 times. The strange flow of time had caused Ji-Yu's arm to twist and crash, and the sound of bones and flesh cracking could be heard coming from his finger bones, forearm bones, arm bones, and shoulder bones at the same time. But, the flow of time was too fast, and the flow of time around Ji-Yu's body remained the same. It was only after the breath of time after his arm was broken that Ji-Yu suddenly felt a sharp pain coming from his arm. With a miserable howl, Ji-Yu, who stood 300 feet tall, grabbed his right arm and jumped more than 2,000 feet into the air, then fell back and sat down on the ground. A deafening rumble echoed out as the front door of King Yongshan's mansion was smashed to pieces by his huge buttocks. Of the over 100 guards standing in front of the door, more than 30 of them failed to flee in time, and were also sat on by his heavy buttocks. After letting out a few wild howls, Ji-Yu's right arm suddenly shook in the wind, and a plume of purple mist swarmed out of the ground and rushed into his arm. Amidst jarring cracking sounds, his broken bones and flesh healed rapidly, and in just a second, his injury was as good as new. Ji-Yu let out a furious roar as he pointed a finger at Wu Qi and bellowed, "Tan Lang, how dare you go against your superior? You're dead." Wu Qi gave a cold snort. "How dare I go against my superior? I'm dead." With a belly full of anger, Wu Qi's body flickered. The starlight in Dark Yin's celestial tower quickly converged, and in the blink of an eye, a huge silver axe was formed over Wu Qi's head, emanating a frigid air. Grabbing the handle of the axe, Wu Qi let out a long roar and swung it down towards Ji-Yu's neck. Clang! A loud clanging sound rang out, as a thick and heavy bronze shield appeared in front of Ji-Yu. Wu Qi felt as if his arm was struck by a thunderbolt. From his fingertips to his shoulder blade, he felt a numbness in his entire arm. The silver axe condensed from the starlight shattered with a boom, transforming into countless silver beams that flew like the wind and shooting in all directions, riddling the street in front of King Yongshan's mansion with bottomless holes the size of bowls. The bronze round shield also trembled, and a clear crack appeared on the surface of the shield. Within the crack, there were fine ice crystals condensing. The skinny man with the shield was knocked back by Wu Qi's axe. As his strength was much weaker than Wu Qi's, he could not keep his balance, and could only stretch out a pair of huge wings from his back, flapping them wildly. With great difficulty, he managed to stabilize himself with the help of the strong wind stirred up by the wings. Wu Qi gave a cold snort as his body suddenly expanded to about 100 feet tall. Layer after layer of black dragon scales emerged from his skin, and 2 dragon horns slowly grew out of his forehead. A fierce and violent aura of blood filled the air. As he roared in a low voice, the shadows of 9 black dragons intertwined with each other behind him and gradually transformed into a mysterious rune, floating amidst the sticky, pitch-black 9 nether ghost flame and emanating an evil aura that made one's heart palpitate. At the same time, countless dragon roars rang out from Wu Qi's rapidly expanding blood vessels. Vigorous dragon energy flowed rapidly in them, and each of them let out a long roar that shook the heavens like a flood dragon. All the blood vessels in his body were connected, and it was as if 100 dragons were coiling around him. This was a strange sign that could only be seen when one had cultivated the dragon transformation script to a certain limit. Whistling noises of waves could be heard coming out from within his body. His blood kept scouring his internal organs, and an endless stream of energy kept rushing out from them, stimulating his body and making it grow several dozens of feet taller, while the aura emanating from him became even fiercer and more threatening. Gao's voice rang out, "Tan Lang, what happened? Just tell me. No matter who dares to bully you, I'll stand up for you." With a gloomy face and a slightly exasperated look on his face, Gao stood in the courtyard behind the mansion's main gate. Standing next to him were his elder brother, Ji Dai, his father, Ji Kuei, the former prefecture overseer of Zhong province, Feng Lingling, and a group of King Yongshan's trusted subordinates. The man who had just blocked Wu Qi's axe with a bronze shield and saved Ji Yu from Wu Qi's attack was none other than Gao's fourth brother, Ji Lan, the king of Dongqiu. Ji Lan, who had the bloodline of the feather men, flapped the two wings on his back and glared at Wu Qi angrily. Jiyu, who nearly had his head chopped off by Wu Qi's axe, was stunned for a moment. Then, he suddenly roared at the top of his voice, "Bullshit! Third brother, your man almost killed me. He almost chopped off my head with his axe. You stand up for him. How can you stand up for him? Father, third brother's man almost killed me. He did it on purpose. He must have done it on purpose. Third brother, I'm not done with you." Ji Dai and Ji Lan's eyes flickered. Just as they were about to add fuel to the fire and help Ji Yu, King Yang Shan snapped, "How dare you? Second brother, do you think you can hide the cause and effect of the matter from me? Shut up. All of you, shut up. Somebody, repair the front gate of the mansion as soon as possible. You bastards, you are simply..." King Yang Shan wanted to say a few harsh words, but it was his son who had stirred up trouble, so he could not go too far. He stared at the front gate with trembling hands. He could not believe that the front gate of King Yang Shan's mansion was shattered by his own sons, but if this got out, he would be the laughing stock of the whole Diyu kingdom. For a moment, King Yang Qiu felt like strangling Ji Yu to death. King Yang Shan gritted his teeth in exasperation and finally managed to control the anger in his heart. He took a deep breath and looked up and down at Wu Qi, who had transformed into a dragon man. Then, he nodded and praised, "Wonderful. It has only been a little over a year for you to cultivate the dragon kill to this level, hasn't it? Very well, third brother, you found a good helper this time." As soon as King Yang Shan said that, Gao shouted, "Father, Tan Lang is indeed a good helper to me. If it weren't for him, how could I have killed the sovereign of the Myriad Immortal Alliance, that evil Taoist priest?" But second brother intentionally humiliated Tan Lang. "You must stand up for me." Jiyu jumped to his feet in a hurry, stamping his feet angrily as he roared, "Father, I was almost killed by Tan Lang's axe. You must stand up for me. If it weren't for third brother, how could Tan Lang have the guts to do that?" Ji Dai, the king of Qingqiu, stirred up trouble on the side. "Father, since when can servants beat their masters?" Ji Lan, with a round shield in his hand, sighed faintly and added fuel to the fire. "Father, which one is more important, a little subordinate or second brother? That axe almost cut me in half." While his four sons kept complaining and making noise, King Yang Shan's face gradually turned pale, blue, and finally an ugly purple-black. Wu Qi retracted the dragon kill and stood angrily to one side, glaring at Ji Yu, Ji Dai, and Ji Lan. When King Yang Shan saw the undisguised murderous gleam in Wu Qi's eyes, he could not help but sigh again in his heart. If they were not his sons, he would have killed these bastards with a slap. Chapter 739. Having too many sons is a big problem. Sitting under a huge ancient tree in the backyard of King Yang Shan's mansion, King Yang Shan sighed helplessly at Wu Qi. Wu Qi and Gao sat side by side opposite King Yang Shan. Apart from the three of them, there was no one else nearby. The ancient tree over their heads was like a canopy, its dense foliage preventing even a ray of sunlight from penetrating it. A cool breeze blew through the nearby forest, bringing with it a cool breeze. There were many nests of thumb-sized green jade pea birds above their heads. These birds were small in stature but had the most melodious calls. They were hiding under the leaves, chirping non-stop. Having too many sons, but each of them is very talented. This is a big problem. Holding the teacup carved out of black jade, King Yang Shan sighed helplessly. His expression was gentle, which was a miracle to those who knew King Yang Shan well. King Yang Shan had always been known for his ruthlessness and ruthlessness. Such a gentle expression, like that of a newly pregnant Virgin Mary, should not have appeared on his face. Wu Qi glanced at Gao, who was taking small sips from the teacup, his face expressionless. Third brother is the same as his brothers. They all want to inherit this king's throne. King Yangshan flicked the teacup with his finger and said lightly, "There are thousands of kings in Diyu, but the most important ones are the 18 kings, including me. Unlike the other kings, these 18 kings have the qualifications to inherit the throne." Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at Gao and thought, this fellow has just been rewarded with an eon of life by the virtue of the heavenly Tao. Could it be that he really has a chance to become the human emperor in the future? If that's the case, I've made a fortune. King Yangshan glanced at Gao and said in a deep voice, "Take third brother for example. He has made such a great contribution that he was conferred the title of King Yufeng. But even if he is conferred the title of prince with the same title as me in the future, he will never become the human emperor." Putting down the teacup, King Yangshan counted on his fingers and said, "If the human emperor passes away, and the crown prince is not talented enough to awe the world, or if for some other reason no one of the human emperor's sons can inherit the throne, the council of elders will choose one of the 18 sect kings to inherit the throne." Gao picked up the teacup and drained it in one gulp, then placed it on the small table beside him. Wu Qi slowly nodded his head. No wonder Ji Yu and the rest had such an attitude towards him. King Yangshan sighed softly, then shook his head and said, "Now it seems that third brother is the most talented one. If nothing unexpected happens, when my life comes to an end, there is an 80% chance that third brother will inherit my throne. But this is not a reason for you brothers to fight." Staring at Gao, King Yangshan said in a deep voice, "If you dare to kill your brother, I'll kill you myself. It's just a few sons. I'm still in the prime of my life, and I can still have more." Gao put his palms on the ground, bowed to King Yangshan, and answered respectfully, "Yes." King Yangshan sighed helplessly. He glanced at Wu Qi, then shook his head and said, "As for Tan Lang, you better assist third brother, and you'll be rewarded in the future. I'm also puzzled by what happened to you today. Who was it that plotted to kill Prabhudaratna Buddha? That old fool Gauchenli is not that cunning. I'll look into it in secret. Just be careful." After pondering for a moment, King Yangshan shook his head and said, "As for how second brother and the others treated you. In any case, third brother is my son, and so are second brother and the others. You are third brother's subordinate, so you'll have to suffer a little and swallow your anger. I happen to have something good here, and I'll give it to you as an apology on behalf of second brother and the others." As he spoke, King Yangshan bowed slightly to Wu Qi. Wu Qi hurriedly rose to his feet and bowed back to King Yangshan, repeatedly saying, "I dare not." King Yangshan had given him a very good impression. At least, when Ji Yu, Ji Dai, and Ji Lan pestered King Yangshan to punish Wu Qi, King Yangshan flew into a rage and drove all three of them out of Yuxiong Plain, forcing them to go back to their fiefdoms as soon as possible. Ji Yu and his two companions came here to celebrate Gao's reward ceremony. Now that the ceremony was over, according to De Yu's rules, they were allowed to stay in Liangzhu for another 10 days or half a month. But this time, they had angered King Yangshan, and were driven back to their fiefdoms by him. Wu Qi had nothing to say about King Yangshan's treatment of his sons, and now, he had solemnly apologized to Wu Qi for his sons. What else could Wu Qi say? King Yangshan's attitude pleased Wu Qi very much, and the resentment in his heart gradually dissipated. After a few polite words, an old man in black walked slowly in from one side, came up to King Yangshan, and whispered a few words in his ear. King Yangshan smiled, then nodded to Gao and said, "It's almost ready. This treasure was originally prepared for your 37th brother, Ji Jiao, but since you found a talent like Tan Lang this time, you might as well give it to Tan Lang." Before Wu Qi and Gao could ask what kind of treasure it was, King Yangshan had risen to his feet, motioned for them to follow, and led them along a path in the woods into the depths of the mansion. Along the way, they passed several heavily guarded checkpoints and came to the foot of a hill in front of them, where a tunnel leading straight to the underground was glowing with a faint green light. King Yangshan turned around and called out to Gao, then led Wu Qi and Gao into the tunnel. After traveling a few miles underground along the clean and bright tunnel, a spacious hall appeared in front of them. The walls of the hall, which measured a few miles in both width and length, were carved with countless images of ghosts and deities. In the center of the hall was a round altar about a mile in diameter, on which a strange-looking beast was coiled lazily. The beast was shaped like a dragon, with a large abdomen and thick black scales all over its body, which were much larger than the scales of a real dragon. True dragons were tall and slender, but this beast that resembled a dragon was thick and short. Its entire body exuded a sense of ferocious and tyrannical power. Its head was huge, and the dragon horns on its head were thick and strong. Its eyes were deep and gleaming with a dazzling blood-red light, and its big mouth was particularly eye-catching. When it opened and closed, a long scarlet tongue and rows of sharp teeth could be seen. Ao Buzan shuddered and said dryly, "Is that a Taotai?" "Tsk, its bloodline is pretty pure, isn't it?" "Is it male or female?" Back then, Lao Tzu. This fellow was going to show off his romantic affairs again. Wu Qi raised a hand and covered his mouth, not wanting to listen to his nonsense. The Taotai coiled on the altar was about a mile long, and had a very strong aura emanating from its body. Visible, blood-red airwaves were constantly spreading out from its body. Inside the hall, hundreds of oracles standing around the altar had to use all kinds of magical treasures to protect themselves, but they could only barely stand still in the hall. The scarlet waves of air battered their bodies, causing their magical artifacts to groan from time to time. Seeing King Yangshan come in, the Taotai yawned lazily, rose to his feet slowly, and nodded to King Yangshan. "Where is your son, King Yangshan?" "I'll tell you this first, if your son is a good-for-nothing, don't blame me for devouring his soul." He licked his nose with his long tongue and said with a cold grin, for a talent like Xiaolong, with such aptitude, he should find a master with the best aptitude in the world. A blood-red gleam shone in his eyes as he gave Wu Qi and Gao a greedy look. The blood-red gleam in Taoyue's eyes was full of devouring power. Gao could not resist the surging power in it. A beam of blue light shot out from the top of his head, and the beast's soul he had fused with, Pu Lao, immediately flew out of his body, throwing his head back and letting out a wild roar. The void around him rippled violently, and when the blood-red gleam in Taoyue's eyes approached Gao's body, it was shredded by the distorted space. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. With a sway of his body, he was shrouded in black flames as he quickly grew to about 100 feet tall. Black dragon scales covered his skin, and a fierce and overbearing dragon aura poured out of him. Staring at Taotai, Wu Qi also let out a loud roar. Ao Buzan's body quickly expanded to about 100 feet long. Pointing a front claw at Taotai, he sneered and said, "You little bastard. If you dared to stare at Lao Tzu like this, I'm sure Lao Tzu would have killed your father, fucked your mother, and then torn you into minced meat to go with wine. Why are you still staring at Lao Tzu? Are you courting death?" Ao Buzan bared his teeth and made a fierce face at Taotai. In the next moment, a dragon aura, 100 times fiercer than the killing aura in Wu Qi's body, quietly rushed out of Ao Buzan's forehead and smashed viciously at Taoyue's head. Pu Lao's roar, Wu Qi's roar, and Ao Buzan's violent threat instantly suppressed the ferocious and greedy Taotai. But that was not the end of it. The dragon python sisters on Wu Qi's shoulders suddenly soared into the sky, opened their mouths, and let out the unique cackling of dragon pythons of fire and ice. At the same time, the ferocious aura of dragon pythons, which had struck fear into all the dragons in the world since ancient times, spread out like a tide. It would have been better if the sisters had not unleashed their power, but as soon as they did, Pu Lao's soul flew back into Gao's body and dared not to show itself again. Wu Qi shuddered, and his Dragonman avatar shivered and quickly returned to his human form. Ao Buzan, who was arrogant and domineering, shivered instinctively. In a flash, he shrunk from 100 feet long black dragon to a 3-inch long loach, squeezing into Wu Qi's collar to hide from the terrible aura, which was almost the natural enemy of dragons. Taotai, who was extremely arrogant and ferocious just a moment ago, suddenly put on a flattering smile. Nodding and bowing, he said to Wu Qi, "You must be Ji Jiao, the 37th son of His Highness, right?" Ha ha ha, to be able to become your beast soul, to live and die together, to advance and retreat together, this is really this little dragon's blessing. Ah. Ha ha ha, are those two beside you really dragon pythons of fire and ice? Haven't they gone extinct a long time ago? A faint smile appeared on King Yangshan's face as he patted him on the shoulder and said, Tan Lang, this is my gift to you. You haven't fused with a beast soul yet, have you? All the warriors of Du need a powerful beast soul so that they can exert their full strength. Even if you are a genius who cultivates both fleshly body and magic, having a beast soul to protect you will be of great help in the future. King Yangshan's so-called treasure was the beast soul of a Taotai. Wu Qi was overjoyed. He quickly bowed and thanked King Yangshan. A beast soul. The benefits were simply too great. And it happened to be the beast soul of Taotai, one of the 9 sons of the dragon. Wu Qi smiled so widely that his eyes narrowed into slits. Although he had encountered some horrors on this trip to Liangzhu, the benefits were too great. Chapter 740. The process of fusing with Taotia's soul reminded Wu Qi of a very long time ago, when he and Yan Bugui first met, and the ritual he saw in the depth of Meng Mountains, when the barbarian girl was fusing with the beast soul of the water spirit serpent. Amidst the slow singing of the oracles and their deep chanting, the soul of Taotai rose slowly from his fleshly body with 90% of his cultivation base, slowly merging with Wu Qi's innate chaotic divine soul. When the soul of Taotai entered Wu Qi's innate chaotic divine soul, Taotai suddenly realized something was wrong. There was something strange about Wu Qi's soul, something very strange. However, before Taotai could let out the strange roar of Wu Qi's soul, his soul had already fused with Wu Qi's innate chaotic divine soul. According to the rule of beast soul fusion, a thread of Taotia's soul had entered the deepest part of Wu Qi's soul, falling into a deep slumber in Wu Qi's soul. This thread of soul would only be awakened when Wu Qi's lifespan came to an end, and at that moment, Taotai would regain control of his own soul. At that time, because his soul had fused with Wu Qi's soul and was nourished by Wu Qi's soul, it would become more complete and stronger. When Taotia's soul entered the transmigration, he would have a more wonderful new life. However, Wu Qi's innate chaotic divine soul would never give Taotai this chance. Right when a thread of Taotia's soul entered the core of Wu Qi's soul, the chaotic energy devoured all of it. The beast soul of Taotai, who was famous for its greedy devouring, had become the tonic for Wu Qi today. All kinds of mystic magics, divine abilities, and instincts of Taotai had fused into Wu Qi's body. As the beast soul fused with Wu Qi's soul, 90% of Taotia's cultivation base was gradually injected into Wu Qi's body. It had to be said that King Yangshan was very attentive to his 37th son. He had paid a great price to get this adult, pure-blooded Taotai with excellent aptitude. This big fellow's cultivation base was much stronger than Wu Qi's today, almost reaching the peak of the 4th-tier gold immortal realm. An enormous power was surging in Wu Qi's body. The strength of his soul and fleshly body were soaring, and so was his magic power. The benefits brought to Wu Qi by fusing with the soul of Taotai were unparalleled. Now, his chaotic energy was filled with an instinctive devouring power. As soon as Wu Qi slightly mobilized the power of the beast soul, a terrible suction came out of his body. A loud buzzing noise came out of Wu Qi's body as the soul of Taotai hovered over Wu Qi's head, threw its head back, opened its mouth, and began to devour wildly. It was as if Wu Qi's body had turned into a huge black hole, with the surrounding natural energy and Panga sacred energy rushing madly into Wu Qi's body. After the initial fusion with the soul of Taotai, the speed at which Wu Qi absorbed the natural energy was 10 times faster than when he exercised his cultivation base at full strength. As he continued to fuse with the soul of Taotai, his speed of absorption in the future might be 100 times, 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times faster than it was now. According to the legends, Taotais were famous for their greed and brutality. Many of them died because they could not digest the food in their bodies because they had devoured too much food. Even with the strong bodies and digestive ability of divine beasts, they could not digest the food they had devoured, which showed how fast Taotai could devour. Now, Wu Qi did not have any problems with his cultivation base. His biggest problem was the lack of magic power. His cultivation base had reached the peak of the Gold Immortal realm, and his ability to use and control his magic power had also reached the highest limit of a Gold Immortal. What hindered him was that the speed at which he accumulated energy was too slow. But now, he had the Supreme Tower, which could control the flow of time, and the Soul of Tao Tai, which could enhance the absorption of energy. It was as if the heaven was helping him, and all the problems had been solved. King Yangshan smiled as he watched Wu Qi unleash the power of the beast soul, then nodded at Gao. Gao smiled and pulled out a bone talisman. With a wave of his hand, the talisman transformed into a thick thunderbolt and shot whistling toward Wu Qi. Wu Qi, who was sitting cross-legged, opened his eyes slightly. The soul of Tao Tai over his head opened its mouth and sucked in the thunderbolt. Without even chewing, it turned into a vast stream of heat that rushed into Wu Qi's body and became a part of his magic power. Pu Lao, Gao's soul, was good at roaring. With a single roar, it could shatter heaven and earth and tear the souls of its enemies to shreds. But the soul of Tao Tai Wu Qi had obtained could devour everything. Except for a few innately dangerous and poisonous things, there was basically nothing in the world that Tao Tai dared not to eat. As long as Wu Qi's body could withstand it, any physical or magical attack would be devoured by Tao Tai. Coupled with the chaotic energy in Wu Qi's body that could melt everything, Wu Qi had now become a complete monster. Unless an almighty expert could kill Wu Qi with a single blow, any attack would be devoured by the soul of Tao Tai and turned into Wu Qi's own magic power. After cultivating with his eyes closed for 2 hours, Wu Qi slowly retracted the soul of Tao Tai into his spiritual ocean. He had wiped out a trace of Tao Tie's true spirit, and its soul had completely become a part of Wu Qi's innate chaotic divine soul. The benefits brought by the soul of Tao Tai were simply too great. In just 2 hours of cultivation, the benefits were almost equal to what Wu Qi had obtained after 10 years of hard work outside Yuxiong Plain. If a Gold Immortal wanted to advance to the next tier, not only would he have to make a breakthrough in his cultivation base, but his magic power would also have to be improved by 1 tier. The difference in the magic power of a tier was usually more than 100 times. Every time a Gold Immortal improved his magic power by 1 tier, he would need to spend eons to painstakingly absorb the natural energy and turn it into his own magic power. Now that Wu Qi had the Supreme Tower, which could control time, and the soul of Tao Tai, which could increase the speed at which he absorbed the natural energy, his future cultivation speed would certainly advance by leaps and bounds, and no one would be able to compete with him. With 90% of Tao Tie's cultivation base injected into his body, Wu Qi's fleshly body and magic power were instantly elevated to the level of a peak 5th-tier Gold Immortal. Feeling his strong fleshly body and abundant magic power, Wu Qi rose to his feet contentedly, bowed to King Yangshan, and said, "Thank you for your help, Your Highness." King Yangshan nodded and said with a smile, "A sword is given to a warrior, and this soul of Tao Tai is a perfect match for you, Tan Lang. Just do your best to assist Gao in the future." Wu Qi cupped his fist, bowed deeply to King Yangshan again, and said, "I know, Tan Lang. I'll definitely assist King Yufeng wholeheartedly in the future." After getting so many benefits, Wu Qi felt that Gao was his lucky star, for he had gained so many benefits without taking any risks in just one expedition with him. If he was lucky enough to ascend to the throne of the human emperor one day, he would have to work hard to support Gao. At the thought of this, Wu Qi could not help but feel a surge of emotions. As the saying went, when the tide rises, the boat rises. Wu Qi's foundation on Panga continent was shallow, so he could only borrow the power of others to help him. King Yangshan laughed heartily and clapped his hands. From a corner of the hall, a group of oracles, clad in blood-red robes and whose faces were covered by blood-red metal masks, walked up silently. Carefully, they gathered around Tao Tie's fleshly body and began to recite an incantation in a low voice. Tao Tie's huge body floated up into the air and gradually shrank. When the Tao Tie's body had shrunk to about 30 feet, they lifted the Tao Tie's body and slowly walked into the main hall. Wu Qi knew that according to the ritual of fusing beast souls with Diyu, Tao Tie's fleshly body would be preserved with a mystic art. When Wu Qi's lifespan came to an end and Tao Ye's soul was reincarnated, if he got a better fortune than he got in this life, such as a body with perfect aptitude like the innate Tao aptitude, it would not be a big deal. But if the body he got in the next life was not satisfactory, he could still return to King Yangshan and retrieve his fleshly body in this life. After fusing with the souls of Deyu's warriors for so many years, their souls would be strengthened and perfected in terms of essence. So, even if they did not get a better fortune in their next life and were forced to retrieve their fleshly body, with a stronger and more perfect soul, they would be able to comprehend the heavenly Tao faster than they did in this life. The lifespan of human warriors was limited, unless they were lucky like Gao, who had been rewarded with an eons of lifespan by the heavenly Tao. For these divine beasts, it was worth it to spend thousands or even tens of thousands of years for a brighter future. No matter how King Yangshan dealt with these problems, after fusing with Tao Ye's soul, the relationship between Wu Qi and Gao had become much closer. Led by Gao, Wu Qi traveled in and out of Liangzhu for half a month. This was the longest time a foreign subject could stay in Liangzhu, so it was time for Wu Qi to leave. Gao, on the other hand, had been rewarded by the human emperor with the right to participate in the military affairs of the imperial court, so he now had the privilege of living in Liangzhu for a long time. King Yangshan had already helped him set up a mansion in the city. It was time for them to part. In the military camp outside Liangzhu, Wu Qi counted the tens of thousands of trusted soldiers he had brought with him, then prepared to return to the East Sea province with Huang Liang and other trusted generals. This time, Huang Liang and the others were also rewarded by the human emperor. Although they were not conferred the title of nobility, their military ranks had been raised by several ranks. As the saying went, when a man attained the Tao, even his chickens and dogs would ascend to heaven. In just a few years of following Wu Qi, Huang Liang and the others had received great benefits from their official positions. Feng Lingling had mixed with Wu Qi's army with a group of his clansmen, preparing to go to Gao's fief along the way. Gao was more than capable of leading the army to war, but when it came to reorganizing the internal affairs of his fief, he was a little clueless. Yu Qingsheng was an expert in administration, but Gao and Yu Qingsheng did not get along. Now, Yu Qingsheng had become the advisor of his elder brother, Ji Dai, while Feng Lingling had been sent by King Yangshan to serve under Gao. According to the rules of Deyu, after Wu Qi had reported to Deyu's military court, he received a reply from them. After that, Gao spent a huge sum of money to buy a large number of powerful armaments for Wu Qi from the military court, asking him to bring them back to the East Sea province. Gao escorted Wu Qi 30,000 miles away from Liangzhu, and then Wu Qi left the city. Leaving with Wu Qi were Gao's generals, who were also conferred the title of nobility. With King Yangshan's help, these people were all given good positions, and they all left Liangzhu today. When he first came to Liangzhu, Wu Qi was just a nobody in Deyu. But when he left, he had left a deep impression in the hearts of many people in Deyu. Chapter 741. 3 jade-armored dark turtle flying ships, 9 green-tailed scarlet-heart scorpion flying ships, 18 one-horned fiery flood dragon flying ships, and 36 green-scaled jade-bone python flying ships. Dozens of large flying ships flew slowly across the sky at an altitude of less than 10 miles above the ground, each of which appeared to be empty. Under the military system of Deyu, each province was only equipped with a certain number of standard flying ships, which were only used as a means of transportation for soldiers and horses. Apart from the fixed number of standard flying ships, if a province wished to acquire other large armaments, it had to use its own funds to purchase them from the Temple of Craftsmen under Liangzhu's military court. These dozens of large flying ships were all powerful armaments that Gao had bought for Wu Qi out of his own pocket. The jade-armored dark turtle flying ships were known for their defensive strength. The green-tailed scarlet-heart scorpion flying ships were known for their lethality, and the venom from their stingers could strike fear into the hearts of even peak-level gold immortals. The one-horned fiery flood dragon flying ships were known for their individual offensive strength, but their group attacks were extremely powerful. Once launched, They could turn an area of 100 miles in circumference into a sea of fire, which was extremely effective against groups of heaven immortals and itinerant cultivators. The green-scaled jade-bone python flying ships were known for their untraceable speed, making them the best vehicle for chasing down fleeing enemies or charging straight into enemy lines to claim the head of a general. Wu Qi only had 10,000 soldiers under his command, but Gao had given him a total of 63 large flying ships. Although these ships were easy to control, when 10,000 soldiers were evenly distributed across the 63 ships, each of which was at least a few miles long, it was inevitable that the ships looked empty. All the ships were flying at the slowest speed, as if they were in no hurry to return to East Sea Province. Although they had left Yuxiong Plain, it was still a huge spirit cave. The closer they were to Yuxiong Plain, the denser the natural energy and Panga's sacred energy would be. Although it was not as ridiculous as Yuxiong Plain, it was still thousands of times stronger than any immortal abode or blessed land. The reason why Wu Qi deliberately flew the ships slowly toward East Sea Province was to absorb more natural energy here. The soul of Tao Tai floated above Wu Qi's head. A trace of Wu Qi's clone replaced its true spirit and became the spiritual core of this soul. The hundreds of feet long Tao Tai opened its mouth and greedily absorbed everything around it. The natural energy of earth, water, fire, and wind, as well as the natural energies of thunder and earth, as well as the Panga's sacred energy that kept gushing out of the ground, an immeasurable amount of natural energy was rushing into his body at every moment. The Panga's sacred energy quickly fused into his limbs, bones, and internal organs, continuously strengthening his physical body and pushing the evolution of the true body of heaven and earth art bit by bit. Skin, bones, flesh, tendons, blood vessels, organs, and all the other parts of the true body of heaven and earth scripture worked together. Every part of his body was strengthened 100 times faster than the foundation scripture. The Panga's sacred energy here was endless, and Wu Qi could strengthen his body in the most extravagant way. All kinds of spiritual energy quickly merged with the chaotic spiritual energy and turned into Wu Qi's own cultivation base. The innate chaos divine soul sat cross-legged in Wu Qi's psyche ocean, emitting a bright light that lit up the boundless psyche ocean. Earth, water, fire, wind, rain, thunder, all natural phenomena were roaring and boiling in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. There was also the divine flame of order, the divine flame of void, the divine flame of great tranquility, the divine flame of inferno of hell, the 9 nether ghost flame, and many other divine flames and ghost flames that Wu Qi had mastered. They hovered above the innate chaotic divine soul like tiny suns, emitting all kinds of strong lights that illuminated tens of thousands of miles. Apart from that, around Wu Qi's innate chaotic divine soul, all kinds of divine beasts were hovering in the air. Massive amounts of chaotic energies were flowing into these divine beasts' bodies, nourishing them and strengthening them. Occasionally, a shadow would flash behind Wu Qi, and the shadow of a mythical beast or mythical bird would flash before disappearing. His body would emit an indescribable aura, vast and mighty, as if he was a mythical beast from the prehistoric times. The innate chaotic divine soul allowed one to multitask at the same time, and its mysteriousness could not be fully described with words. Wu Qi had only separated a small part of his mind to control the Tao Tai soul to devour natural energy, and to control the circulation of the true body of heaven and earth scripture, the 7 foundation elevating technique, and the dragon transformation script. Most of his mind had fused with the kaleidoscopic star core that he had placed in his chaotic interstitial world. Since Yu Chen and the other sect masters and elders of Yen Tian Palace had failed to activate the kaleidoscopic star core, there was only one way to obtain the heavenly Tao of innate stars contained within it. Apart from a unique incantation gesture and incantation, one would also need chaotic energies as a catalyst. No matter how mighty one's magic power was, one could only destroy the kaleidoscopic star core at most, and never obtain any benefits from it. At this moment, in Wu Qi's interstitial world, the kaleidoscopic star core was hovering in the boundless void, emanating dazzling starlight that filled Wu Qi's small interstitial world. Amidst the rapidly flickering starlight, 108,000 huge silver light balls could be vaguely seen spinning at high speed. Every now and then, mysterious energy waves would surge out of these silver light balls, causing the endless chaotic energies in Wuqi's interstitial world to tremble violently. Wuqi's muscles were trembling. The corners of his mouth curved upward, and he almost burst out laughing. This kaleidoscopic star core contained 108,000 grand daos of the stars, and they corresponded to the fate of life, death, calamity, fortune, mystery, trap, entrapment, despair, joy, anger, sorrow, ring, nobility, inferiority, purity, and turbidity. Each great Tao of stars was completely different from all the other stars in the universe, and contained endless mysteries. If one could fully comprehend any great Tao of stars and obtain enough natural energy to form the true form of the star, one could immediately give birth to a celestial lord whose power was not weaker than a peak-level gold immortal. Just like Patriarch Miao Ying, who lived in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, she was given the title of Nine-Yin Celestial Lord by the Celestial Court. It was because she had mastered the innate Nine-Yin principle of the Nine-Yin star, and had formed the true form of the Nine-Yin star, that she was given the title of Celestial Lord. It was also with the help of the innate Nine-Yin principle that Patriarch Miao Ying was able to break through the realm of gold immortal and become a primordial immortal. But in this kaleidoscopic star core that Wuqi had mastered, there were 108,000 great Tao of stars. Laughing under his breath, Wuqi could not help but shake his head. This kaleidoscopic star core was one of the supreme treasures in the primordial chaos, and was much stronger than those innate stars that had only given birth to a few dozens or hundreds of great Tao. But, there was a limit to one's strength, and Wuqi did not think that he could fully comprehend all 108,000 great Tao. The only use of this kaleidoscopic star core was to set up a formation and improve Wuqi's actual combat strength. What a pity! Wuqi sighed lightly, then laughed and said, fortunately. It was a pity that this kaleidoscopic star core could not form a star, and the heavenly Tao that it had nurtured for countless eons in the primordial chaos was wasted in vain. Fortunately, this kaleidoscopic star core did not fall into the hands of those almighty experts who knew what was good for it. Otherwise, those almighty experts would have obtained an extraordinary treasure with incredible power, and Wuqi would not be so lucky. Even if I can't fully comprehend the 108,000 star core, it will still be beneficial to me. His hands changed incantation gestures, and the kaleidoscopic star core in his interstitial world disintegrated with a loud rumble, turning into 108,000 balls of silver light that spread out in a marvelous spiral path in Wuqi's interstitial world. A tremendous suction force rushed out of these 108,000 balls of silver light, and the chaotic energy around Wuqi kept rushing into them. The suction force was so strong that it actually emptied Wuqi's chaotic energy. He gave a muffled snort as the sudden tremendous suction force inside his body caused Wuqi's body to collapse inward, and blood oozed out of his 7 apertures. He gave a deep cry, and the mountains and hills he had plundered from Green Cliff Planet, Myriad Immortals Planet, and other planets in his interstitial world disintegrated at the same time, turning into a vast amount of natural energy and fusing into the silver light that was trying to condense into stars. At the same time, the huge energy veins he had plundered also quickly fused into the silver light. In just the space of 3 breaths, 108,000 sesame-sized silver light specks had taken shape in Wuqi's interstitial world. Surrounding an invisible point in the void, these light specks formed a huge spiral galaxy with 16 spiral arms, rotating at an extremely slow speed. An extremely mysterious aura emanated from this tiny galaxy, and Wuqi could clearly sense that his innate chaotic divine soul was benefiting greatly from it at every moment. His divine soul was slowly growing stronger, and so was his cultivation base. Wuqi seemed to have comprehended something about the profound principles of life, death, disaster, fortune, mystery, trap, despair, joy, anger, sorrow, nobility, inferiority, purity, turbidity, and so on. But at the same time, it was as if he had not comprehended anything at all. In short, it was a strange feeling that could not be described with words. "Tsk, I owe Yu-chan a great favor," Wuqi murmured to himself as he quickly replenished the chaotic energy in his body with the soul of Taotai. The benefits that this kaleidoscopic star core had brought to Wuqi were indescribable. It could even be said that this kaleidoscopic star core had laid the foundation of the great Tao for Wu Qi and countless disciples of the underhand sect. Wu Qi had a feeling that he owed Yu Qin a great favor, and that he had to find a way to repay it in the future. With a shake of his left hand, a pale silver wolf appeared in Wu Qi's palm. It was the true form of the greedy wolf star, one of the 3 stars in the universe, the killing vanquishing wolf star. Using the technique commonly used by immortals to borrow the power of the stars, Wu Qi had formed his true form of the star and manifested this little wolf. A powerful, pure, greedy, and murderous aura spread out from the little wolf-shaped body, and in the blink of an eye, a chilly, murderous aura enveloped the quiet room that Wu Qi occupied. With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi shook his right palm. A strange wolf with a pitch-black body, 3 wolf heads, and saliva dripping down from the corner of its mouth appeared in his palm. This 3-headed wolf was the true form of the Nether Wolf Star, a star that represented the Tao of slaughter among the 108,000 stars that were formed from the kaleidoscopic star nucleus. It did not have the greedy aura of the greedy wolf star, but only a pure murderous aura, mixed with an indescribable evil and mysterious aura. The evil aura mixed with the murderous aura expanded rapidly, instantly suppressing the energy ripples emanating from the greedy wolf star. Wonderful. Wu Qi smiled. The power of these stars derived from his interstitial space was stronger than all the stars in the universe. Of course, in terms of total quantity, the 108,000 stars Wu Qi possessed were only as small as a sesame seed, while all the stars in the universe had a diameter of trillions of miles. Therefore, the overall strength of these stars Wu Qi possessed could not be compared with the stars in the universe. But, as long as Wu Qi was given enough time and energy, he would be able to cultivate these stars in his interstitial world into terrifying existences that were not weaker than the stars in the universe. I have a bright future ahead of me. Wu Qi felt that his mind was extremely clear, and his heart was so smooth that he could ignore all the difficulties and obstacles in the world. While he was reveling in this wonderful feeling, a long tiger roar was heard, and the flying ship Wu Qi was riding on suddenly trembled. Chapter 742. The tiger's roar came endlessly, like the endless rustling of pine trees in the deep mountains. From the moment Wu Qi heard the tiger's roar to the moment he retracted all the cultivation techniques, hid all the chaotic energy in his body, concealed all his aura, and strode out of the room, it had been a quarter of an hour. The tiger's roar did not stop. It lasted for a quarter of an hour, and the flying ship Wu Qi was riding on only vibrated for a quarter of an hour. When he came to the bridge on the highest floor, Huang Liang had already commanded all the flying ships to form a tight defensive spirit tortoise formation with the 3 flying ships as the core. It was a defensive formation specially made by Great Yu for the Jade Armor Dark Turtle flying ship, which had a very strong defense and survivability on the battlefield. The 3 jade-shelled Mystic Turtle flying boats were surrounded by 60 large flying boats. The 3 turtle-shaped jade lights covered an area of 100 miles. The 60 flying boats shot out countless bronze chains to connect with the jade-shelled Mystic Turtle flying boat in the center. The energy cores of all the flying boats were connected through these bronze chains. Powerful spiritual power ran back and forth in the chains, forming a large net that protected all the flying boats in the center. A white sound wave visible to the naked eye came from a mountain in the distance, but the 3 turtle-shaped jade lights firmly blocked the attack of the white sound wave. The sound wave shattered on the jade-colored light wave after wave, turning into wild gusts of wind that blew in all directions, but the flying ships did not move at all. The wild gusts of wind rolled up the small hills on the ground. As soon as Wu Qi walked into the bridge, he saw through the thick crystal wall in front of the flying ship that a mountain several miles high was uprooted and thrown into the sky. This was the power of a single roar. If Huang Liang had not reacted accurately and formed the spirit tortoise formation with amazing defensive power in time, those green-scaled jade bone python flying ships, which flew extremely fast but did not have great defense, would have been damaged. Huang Liang was greedy, lustful, wretched, and despicable. Moreover, he was greedy for life and afraid of death. He was really not a good candidate to be a general. However, it was his cowardice that allowed him to make the most correct response. Just like when Wu Qi was taken into the Buddhist kingdom by Mingli, and just like today when he was attacked by the tiger's roar. Wu Qi patted Huang Liang, whose forehead was drenched in cold sweat, and said with a smile, "Well done. Do a good job. Next time we can make some contributions. This marquis will guarantee that you will also be conferred the title of marquis for fun." Huang Liang, who was pale with fright, immediately became spirited. With Wu Qi in front of him, his back was much stiffer. He held his head high and shouted, "You are right, Marquis of Zhou. My brothers and I will definitely follow Marquis of Zhou and make more contributions." With a ruddy face, Huang Liang turned and shouted at the mountaintop tens of miles away, "With the Marquis of Diyu East Sea here, who dares to block our way? Touch your neck and see if you have washed it clean, or we will chop off your head and kick it like a ball." Huang Liang's cultivation base was not very strong, but he was still a cultivator of the first Panga heaven. Therefore, his roar was full of energy and awe-inspiring. His roar created a cyan sound wave in the air. The sound wave, visible to the naked eye, shot forward like a meteor, and fiercely collided with the white tiger roar. Crack! Huang Liang's roar was shattered by the white sound wave, and his voice became stuttering and intermittent. But, because of the strong wind, his voice still managed to travel more than 100 miles away. Along with a cold snort, the mountaintop in front of them suddenly rose into the air. Strong gusts of wind carried the mountaintop, which was tens of miles in circumference, and slowly flew towards them. Wu Qi's eyesight was excellent. Without using any divine ability, he had already seen dozens of strange-looking men and women standing on the top of the mountain. Their clothes were very different from those of Diyu and even those immortals. Most of the men were tall and majestic. Their chests were bared, but they wore short skirts made of various animal skins. A few of them wore half-heart covering armors on their chests, and arm guards of various colors on their arms. The arm guards were simple and unadorned, exuding an air of savagery. Most of them were shaped like the heads of wild beasts, with all kinds of runes and patterns carved on them. As for the women, they were all beautiful and strong. They were clad in tight-fitting shorts and short battle skirts, while some of them wore short-sleeved shirts, and some only wore metal armors that looked like bikinis. Their wrists were equipped with shields, and their hands were armed with various short spears and swords. One or more strange-looking spirit beasts were crouching beside each of these men and women. These spirit beasts were baring their teeth and staring at Wu Qi with fierce gleams flashing in their eyes, as if they would attack Wu Qi and the others at any time. A silver-haired man, standing 20 feet tall and muscular, stood at the forefront of these men and women. He had his arms crossed over his chest, and a pair of ferocious eyes were fixed at Wu Qi and the few captains standing next to him through the crystal wall. There was a faint black king character in between this man's eyebrows. A few steel needle-like whiskers grew on both sides of his cheeks, and 4 extremely long fangs poked out of his lips. No matter how one looked at him, he looked like a ferocious tiger that had transformed into a human form. Moreover, this man's hair was very well developed. His exposed skin was covered with a layer of fluffy silvery hair, but there were also many pale black stripes in the middle of the silvery hair. He looked like a ferocious tiger that stood on its hind legs, and didn't look like a human at all. This man opened his mouth and gave Wu Qi a ferocious grin. Deep and muffled gasps were constantly coming out from the gaps between his teeth, and a dense white mist was ejected from his mouth like a sharp blade. Along with an air-piercing sound of metal, the white mist circled around his body for a few times, and then quickly merged into his body. Wu Qi's eyes flickered. When the man breathed, the energy essence of 5 metals that was close to the innate energy of gold element came out. Judging from his appearance, he was not a human, but a demon body cultivated by the clan of white tigers, a divine beast. Judging from the appearance of his fur, he should be a pure-blooded descendant of divine beasts. Even if he had some mixed blood, it was insignificant. A pure-blooded descendant of divine beasts was highly valued in Diyu, the Celestial Court, the Buddhist League, and even the 5 great emperors who nominally occupied the 5 regions of Panga continent. Du needed these descendants of divine beasts to offer their souls to increase the number of powerful beast warriors for Du. The Celestial Court, the Buddhist League, and other powers all needed these descendants of divine beasts to enhance their overall strength. With this man's cultivation base, if he were to join the Celestial Court, he would immediately be promoted to at least the rank of Lord of Heaven. If he were to become the disciple of a Buddha, he would become an important figure like the guardian of Dharma, who was in charge of a large number of outer heavenly realms. Wu Qi looked at the men and women behind him again. None of them were weaker than this man. They were all gold immortals, and some of them were even as strong as Wu Qi, almost reaching the 5th tier of gold immortal realm. There were at least 50 gold immortals in front of him. Wu Qi could not help but sigh. Among his 10,000 soldiers, only Huang Liang and a few other generals could fight against heaven immortals. Moreover, Huang Liang was a coward. Even though he had fought Ming Li to the death last time, he was still not very reliable. The rest of the soldiers could only deal with ordinary cultivators, and were not of much use. It was a little difficult for Wu Qi to deal with these 50 gold immortals. Although he had all kinds of mystic arts and divine abilities, and a secret treasure that could control time like Dark Yin Celestial Tower, he could not fight against so many enemies. On top of that, the overall strength of gold immortals who were descendants of divine beasts could not be judged by their cultivation base. Like longbow people, any descendant of divine beasts had the overall strength to challenge those who were stronger than them. Although this white tiger's cultivation base was at the peak of the 6th tier of gold immortal realm, his true overall strength should be equal to that of a 1st tier gold immortal. With a deep sigh, Wu Qi left the flying ship with a flash and went to meet the group of men and women who came with ill intentions. After flying a few miles on a cloud, Wu Qi cupped his fist at the group of men and women and said, "May I ask why you are blocking my way? You need to know that this is the territory of Du. Are you trying to fight with me, Du?" Wu Qi looked back over his shoulder. After leaving Yuxiong Plain, he had deliberately asked Huang Liang and the others to slow down. Now, they were only tens of thousands of miles away from the border of Yuxiong Plain. With Du's overall strength, everything within 10 billion miles of Yuxiong Plain was under strict surveillance. If these men and women dared to make too much noise, perhaps the army stationed in Yuxiong Plain would come immediately. By glancing back over his shoulder, Wu Qi was warning these men and women, "This is right under the nose of Du's capital, so don't go too far." The white tiger gave Wu Qi a gloomy look, then gritted his teeth and said with a cold grin, "So, you are Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province?" Wu Qi nodded slowly and said, "Yes, I am." "May I ask?" The white tiger waved his hand and interrupted Wu Qi. "That's right. Cut the crap. Lao Tzu is Baizhu, the king of Tiger Mountain who serves the White Emperor in the west. Lao Tzu, let me ask you one thing. Are you the one who laid out the myriad poisons formation and helped that King Yang Qiu kill the sovereign and all the immortals around him?" Gingerly, Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture and prepared his Dark Yin Celestial Tower to fly out to fight the enemy. "Yes," he said in a deep voice. "Everyone in Du knows about this. May I ask why King Baizhu is asking about this?" Baizhu's body trembled as he let out a furious roar. Pointing a finger at Wu Qi, he growled, "Why does Lao Tzu care about Du and Myriad Immortal Alliance? It's your business that you laid out the Myriad Poisons formation and killed the sovereign, but you fucking killed Lao Tzu's only son as well. Damn it, Lao Tzu's precious son is still underage. Even if you want to use the white tiger's skin to make clothes, you should wait until he grows up first." Baizhu's eyes suddenly turned blood red. Howling, he charged at Wu Qi and threw a punch at his face. "Damn it! Lao Tzu has been waiting here for 7 days and 7 nights, and you little bastard are finally here. Give me back the life of Lao Tzu's son." As soon as Baizhu moved, the natural energy within 1,000 miles around Wu Qi immediately changed. All the natural energy was dispelled by the strong metal energy, and the heaven and earth were completely occupied by it. As far as the naked eye could see, the heaven and earth turned into a vast expanse of white and silver. A strong pressure came pouring in from all directions, and the boundless murderous aura transformed into countless sharp blades, spears, swords, and halberds as they shot toward Wuqi. The men and women behind Baizhu roared furiously, "Give me back my son," and charged at Wuqi as if they had gone mad. Wuqi was struck dumb. When did the myriad poisons formation kill their son? Chapter 743. An ordinary weapon conjured from gold element energy? Wuqi was not afraid of such a thing. The black nine nether ghost flame soared into the sky. Together with a frigid air, the filthy and evil ghost flame transformed into 9 black flood dragons that twisted and wheeled behind him. Countless weapons that came flying toward him were hit by the black flame and immediately disintegrated, no longer looking as ferocious as before. But the biggest threat was Baizhu. The burly man opened his mouth and took a deep breath. In an instant, all the gold element energy within 1,000 miles turned into a torrent and rushed into his mouth. A dazzling light burst out of Baizhu's body. The silver light was accompanied by countless sharp thorns, and as he swooped down on Wuqi, they tore through the void and left behind countless tiny black marks. Baizhu's fist came smashing down toward Wuqi's face like a meteor. A ball of silver light flickered and danced on his fist. It was as hot as a flame and gave off a dangerous aura that made one's heart palpitate. Wherever the silver light passed, the void was torn apart as if it had been shattered. The fist was still dozens of feet away from Wuqi's face, but the cold wind had already cut tiny bloody marks on Wuqi's face. Taking a deep breath, Wuqi gave Baizhu a mysterious smile. A beam of black light rushed out of the top of his head, and amidst it, the dark-green celestial tower expanded rapidly, growing from the size of a fist to tens of feet tall. Streams of silver starlight poured down from the edge of the tower, twisting and turning in the air like auroras, filling the air with a magnificent 7-colored glow. The fact that Baizhu was able to disperse all the natural energy within 1,000 miles, leaving only the unique energy of the 5 elements, had a great impact on Wuqi. But, although Baizhu could dispel all kinds of natural energy, there was only one force that he could not dispel, the power of the stars that illuminated the entire Panga continent from the sky. Even though it was broad daylight, the power of the stars still existed and filled the surroundings. The dark-green celestial tower was covered with a thick layer of silver light, about a foot thick. Streams of silver light could be seen rushing down from the sky and pouring into the tower. With a sinister smile, Wuqi pointed at the dark-green celestial tower, and the flow of time in the vicinity suddenly accelerated by 100 times. The sudden increase in the flow of time caused Baizhu to lose control of his body. His body tilted to one side, and he bumped into Wuqi's back in a sorry state. Silently, the shadow of a 3-headed wolf emerged behind Wuqi. He softly chanted an incantation, and the enormous star force absorbed by the dark-green celestial tower poured into the wolf's body, causing it to rapidly expand from the size of a fist to dozens of feet long. 3 shrill wolf howls rang out. Wuqi slapped the wolf's neck and pointed at Baizhu's body. Without making a sound, the wolf lunged at Baizhu with a gust of wind. Its 3 big mouths bit at Baizhu's neck, the back of his heart, and the ribs on his waist. Baizhu struggled to muster his divine power. The powerful white light around him trembled, and he barely got rid of some of the influence of the time acceleration on his body. Then, he swung his right fist at the 3-headed wolf. At the same time, he sneered and said, "How can a little trick like borrowing the star force hurt Lao Tzu?" If the celestial lords of the celestial court had mastered the power of the stars, Lao Tzu would not be afraid of them. "But who do you think you are?" Before his voice could fade away, Baizhu let out a shrill howl. Just as Baizhu's fist was about to touch his body, the 3-headed wolf's body suddenly turned into a cloud of smoke and dissipated. Then, it reformed on Baizhu's body. Baizhu's neck, the back of his heart, and the ribs on his waist were bitten at the same time. A large amount of silver-white blood sprayed out. The 3-headed wolf shook its neck wildly, trying its best to tear at the wounds on Baizhu's body. A strange poison seeped into Baizhu's body, quickly turning the skin and flesh around his wounds purple and black. As the descendant of the white tiger, a sacred beast of the four directions, Baiju's body was extremely strong. Few poisons in the world could hurt him. But the poison in the three-headed wolf's body was a poison derived from the great Tao of innate stars, which had never been seen before in the world. Even Baiju's ancestors had never encountered such a poison, so naturally, he could not resist the poison. A tiger's roar soared into the sky. Baiju's body bounced up, and a large amount of blood sprayed down like a rainstorm. The three-headed wolf had torn off dozens of kilograms of his flesh, but he still managed to break free from its mouth with great ferocity. With 3 badly mangled wounds on his body and bones exposed, Baiju scrambled backward in a sorry state. He strode up to a woman, who was slightly smaller than him and also had the distinctive features of a white tiger, and said angrily, "Son of a bitch, hurry up and find me a detoxifying pill." What a cruel and strange curse. Did he borrow the power of the stars? Wu Qi smiled faintly. He did not have the obligation to answer her questions. The power of all the celestial lords in the stars controlled by the celestial court had been thoroughly studied by all the cultivators in the world. Even the weapons those celestial lords used and what they liked to eat had been widely spread among the cultivators. But, the star power Wu Qi borrowed was not the star power of the celestial lords known to the public, but the brand new power of the stars from the kaleidoscopic star core. No matter how hard Baiju racked his brains, he would never have imagined that Wu Qi had actually obtained a kaleidoscopic star core, and had even developed an innate galaxy in his interstitial world, would he? Laughing coldly, Wu Qi turned to look at the dozens of men and women who were following closely behind Baiju. He gently stroked the body of the three-headed wolf next to him and cried out in a low voice, "Be careful, Eo Buzan. How much you can gain will depend on your own abilities." Among the men and women who were charging at him, 2 couples were obviously the descendants of the flood dragons. They had dragon horns on the top of their heads, faint dragon scales on their brows and necks, and a strong and pure flood dragon aura emanating from their bodies. Eo Buzan gave a strange laugh as he leaped into the air and quickly transformed into a 100-feet-long flood dragon, unleashing an extremely strong dragon aura that blotted out the sky. The 2 couples who were charging at him were taken aback. They stared at Eo Buzan in horror and snapped, "Ancient dragons?" Before Eo Buzan could say anything, the dragon python sisters had already unleashed the unique aura of dragon pythons of fire and ice. In the ancient times, dragon pythons of fire and ice were the natural enemies of all dragons. As soon as they unleashed their ferocious aura, the 2 couples shrieked and turned to flee, almost instinctively. Wu Qi gently crooked his finger, and a few mysterious runes quickly took shape on his fingertips. These few runes came from the Book of Ancient God, which was inherited from Scroll of Stealing. They were powerful offensive runes that represented the meaning of shattering and shattering. They had the incredible power to shatter everything in the world and destroy everything in it. Then, Wu Qi extracted a wisp of the essence star power from one of the 108,000 stars that represented slaughter and death and injected it into the few runes. After that, he injected all the enormous star power he had absorbed from the Dark Yin celestial tower into the few runes. The runes, which were only the size of a thumb, suddenly expanded to the size of a basin. Shrouded in black smoke and flickering with a magnificent silver gleam, they shot out silently and quickly. Under the lock of Wu Qi's divine sense, the extremely fast runes hit the backs of the 2 couples who had turned to flee. Painful dragon roars soared into the sky. The Samadhi true fire mixed with their natal blood essence spurted out from the 7 orifices of the couple, causing their lava-like dragon blood to shoot out in all directions along with spiraling flames. The black runes and silver starlight smashed into their bodies, and the couple uncontrollably revealed their true forms. They were 2 green dragons and 2 white dragons. The green dragons were poisonous, and the white dragons could control water. Both of them were branches of the dragons that did not have a very high status. Now, all 4 flood dragons, which were several miles long, had a large gap on their backs. Their bodies were nearly ripped in half by Wu Qi's runes, and golden blood was spraying out of their wounds. Through their wounds, Wu Qi could see that their dragon bones and tendons had all been ripped apart. "Lao Tzu, I'm so sorry to bully you kids, roared Ao Buzan crazily, but, bullying others is the source of happiness. TSK, these two girls look pretty good. While babbling nonsense, Ao Buzan turned into a dark shadow and rushed toward the 4 flood dragons, who had been forced to reveal their true forms. Then, he opened his mouth and tried to devour them. The heads of the 2 male dragons were bitten off by Ao Buzan. Large streams of black light burst out of Ao Buzan's mouth, and the bodies of the 2 huge dragons were swallowed into his stomach. Meanwhile, the 2 female dragons roared hoarsely, twisting and struggling desperately. But, as they were severely wounded, they did not have much strength left. Laughing evilly, Ao Buzan reached out his front claws and grabbed their heads, forcing them to shrink their bodies, and were squeezed tightly in Ao Buzan's hands. Sigh. Killing his husband and robbing his wife, since when did Lao Tzu become so evil? Laughing in a strange voice, Ao Buzan was so excited that even his scales were shaking. Lao Tzu has always been like this. Hee, how many years has it been since I last did this? You too, don't move. As long as you have slept with Lao Tzu once, you will never forget it for the rest of your lives. Damn it. Too dark. Primordial divine symbols darted over and accurately hit the foreheads of the 2 female dragons, shattering their skulls. Ao Buzan turned his head around, feeling wronged. Wu Qi looked at him coldly and growled in a low voice, I don't care about murder and arson, but don't do such immoral things. You can just eat them, why do you have to kidnap them and do that kind of thing? I can marry you legally, but I can't rape you. Disappointed, Ao Buzan threw his head back and let out a long roar. Lowering his voice, he complained, What is this? What is this? TSK, what a pair of beautiful ladies. Marry legally? Bah, a real man, who would be stupid to marry legally? That's so satisfying, isn't it? Letting out a long sigh, Ao Buzan did not feel guilty at all. He stuffed the 2 female dragons into his mouth and ate them as well. Even Wu Qi could not help but grimace when he saw that. He knew that Ao Buzan was definitely not a good guy in the past, and now he was even more certain of that. Generally speaking, even the most ferocious of evildoers would not devour their own kind, but Ao Buzan had eaten 4 flood dragons just like that. No wonder he was killed in the past, and even had his tendons pulled out and his skin made into a storage ring. He really deserved it. Shaking his head, Wu Qi turned to the dozens of men and women, who had unsightly expressions on their faces, and said, I don't know if I killed your sons in the myriad poison formation. But you came to me for trouble. You deserve to die. Pointing his finger out, 360 balls of silver light shot out from the Darkeen celestial tower, transforming into silver light beams about 1 mile in size and hovering high up in the sky. A strong power of stars enveloped the surroundings, and the void abruptly turned into a vast silver ocean. Wu Qi had quickly deployed a great formation. Chapter 744. Ignorant boy, how dare you trap and kill us with a star formation? Among the dozens of trapped men and women, a man and a woman laughed complacently. Within a radius of 100 miles, starlight filled the air, and the murderous power of the stars turned into a silver void that enveloped everything. Looking around, it was all silver, and no one knew where they were. But none of these men and women panicked. Everyone laughed along with the man and woman. Even Bai Zhu, who had more than half of his body covered by the purple-black poisonous gas and was trembling with pain, was laughing complacently, as if it was a joke that Wu Qi had trapped them with a star formation. Amidst their laughter, the man and woman suddenly transformed into 2 silver rhinoceroses, each one 1,000 feet tall and over 2,000 feet long. They had 3 extremely sharp, pale golden horns on their heads, which were translucent, and one could vaguely see countless golden clouds rolling around them. Their horns were crystal clear, and there seemed to be a mass of liquid rolling inside them, which seemed to be seeping out of them. Even Huang Liang, who knew nothing about treasures in the universe, had his eyes lit up. The 6 horns of the couple were definitely rare treasures. Apart from the 6 golden horns that seemed to be full of liquid, the silver rhinoceros's skins were also amazing. The surface of the shiny silver skins was actually reflecting the light of countless stars, and there were countless layers of starlight spreading and growing inside the skins. Soon, a complete map of the stars was reflected on the skins. Wuqi was shocked. These were 2 rare ancient beasts, star golden rhinoceroses. Star golden rhinoceroses were also divine beasts left behind from the chaos. But unlike powerful divine beasts like the azure dragon and the white tiger, star golden rhinoceroses could observe the sky and know the geography. They were born with the ability to control fate by observing the stars in the universe. If the azure dragon and the white tiger were the best generals among the divine beasts, then the star golden rhinoceroses were recognized as the brains of the innate divine beasts. Since ancient times, when the innate gods still ruled the world, and the divine beasts could also occupy their own territories, the star-striped golden rhinoceros clan often served as the strategists of many forces, big and small. They even became the masters of some forces, and all actions were based on their plans. However, after the rise of the human tribe, the immortal tribe split from the human tribe. The human tribe and the immortal tribe joined forces to defeat the innate deity and destroy the innate deity's rule over this world. That was when the tragic years of the star-striped golden rhinoceros came. Like dragon pythons of fire and ice, for those greedy immortals, every part of star golden rhinoceros was a treasure, and even their fur was the best material for making talisman brushes. So, after the human race occupied Panga continent and the immortals occupied outer heavenly realms, the star golden rhinoceros race was almost wiped out in just one eon. As he quickly recalled the information about the star golden rhinoceros, Wuqi laughed and said, "Well, just when I thought my formation was lacking a few formation flags to control the power of the stars, you've brought them to me. Well, your horns can be used to craft at least 36 formation flags, and your bones can be used to craft 1080 star banners. How wonderful!" Amidst his laughter, Wuqi slapped the back of his head, and the 9 nether ghost flame transformed into a giant hand that measured a few miles in circumference, grabbing at the 2-star golden rhinoceros with a frigid and evil aura. Wuqi was overjoyed. If he could skin these 2-star golden rhinoceros and refine them into formation flags and star banners that could control the power of the stars, the power of his star formation would be increased by at least 10 times. Every hair on a star golden rhinoceros was born with the best combination of star power, and had the power to control the power of the stars. Of course, if he killed them after catching them, it would seem a little wasteful. Wuqi blinked his eyes, then nodded and said, "Well, sustainable development is a scientific concept of development. You can't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Just be obedient and go to my livestock pen in the East Sea province to reproduce. I happen to have a prescription that can help you ancient divine beasts reproduce, and I can guarantee you a prosperous family." The 2-star golden rhinoceros were trembling with anger when they heard that Wuqi was going to use them to craft formation flags and star banners, and when they heard that Wuqi was going to rear them like livestock, they were even more furious. The tragic fate of the ancestors of the star golden rhinoceros was very famous among the divine beasts. After all, there were not many divine beasts who were as unlucky as them, who were hunted by countless immortals and almost wiped out. Wuqi's words were tantamount to digging a hard knife into the scars of the entire star golden rhinoceros race, and the 2-star golden rhinoceros immediately went mad. Their 6 golden horns shot out a large sheet of golden light, which turned into a torrent and smashed into the 360 star beads floating above Wuqi's head. Wherever the golden torrent passed, the starlight ejected from the star beads suddenly froze, and the originally agile star power became as solid as thin ice, shattered by the golden torrent. Crisp explosions rang out everywhere in the silver void, and before long, large cracks appeared in the silver void, through which one could see the beautiful scenery of green mountains and clear waters outside. The star-striped golden rhinoceros was worthy of being a remnant ancient beast. To them, mastering the power of the stars was as natural as eating and drinking for ordinary people. Any formation that was set up with the power of the stars was no secret to them. If what Wu Qi had laid out was a formation constructed with the power of the 5 elements, earth veins, or even ghosts and deities, it would not have been so easy for the 2-star golden rhinoceros to break it. But the star formation was too weak to withstand a single blow from them. The golden light ejected from their golden horns froze the star formation formed by Wu Qi's 360 star beads. Amidst the laughter of the other men and women, the 2-star golden rhinoceros took a deep breath, and their bodies suddenly expanded to tens of thousands of feet long. Countless stars flickered rapidly under their skin, and billions of starlight shot out of their skin. Countless specks of silver light wheeled around them like fireflies, and a vivid star map emerged out of thin air around them. However, it was obvious that the cultivation base of these 2-star golden rhinoceros was not strong enough. The star map they could activate probably only accounted for less than 10% of the stars in the sky, but its power was already frightening enough. Wherever those tiny specks of silver light passed, Wu Qi's formation quickly disintegrated, and the silver void was soon swept away. The 2-star golden rhinoceros laughed aloud and said, "Tan Lang, you little boy, we can break your star formation with just a flick of our fingers. What else do you have to rely on? You've laid out a myriad poisons formation and killed our beloved son. Today, we'll capture you first, and then we'll settle the score with the human emperor." The dozens of men and women who followed closely behind the rhinoceros roared in unison, "That's right. Let's capture this boy first, and then we'll settle the score with the human emperor. Even the current human emperor has no reason to kill our son for no reason." There was also a woman with a strong figure, a beautiful face, and a few faint animal tattoos on her cheeks. She snapped, "Even the great heavenly venerables of the celestial court are too lazy to get involved in the shady business between Yu and the union of 10,000 immortals. Why do you want to involve our son? Could it be that Yu is only afraid of the celestial court, and you think we're easy to bully?" The woman let out a furious roar and suddenly transformed into a pale golden leopard with 3 tails on its back. Then, she pounced at Wu Qi. The woman sped through the air, covering a distance of thousands of feet in just a flash. Clearly, she had the ability to travel through the void, just like the heavenly ghost from the outer domain. With just a roar, the woman had arrived in front of Wu Qi. She opened her mouth and bit down at Wu Qi's head, while her 3 tails swept across the air. Immediately, rings of golden rings wrapped around Wu Qi's body. They were hazy, as if they were formed from mist, but each of them was as heavy as several dozens of mountains. Layer after layer, they came pressing down on Wu Qi, and with each additional layer, the pressure Wu Qi felt increased by 10 times. The divine beast, the Earth Spirit Leopard, was born with the ability to control the power of Earth. Its 3 tails could be used to draw runes in the air at will, and mobilize the power of the earth and mountains to suppress the enemy. Legend had it that the mountain-driving whip, an ancient treasure, was made from the tail of the Earth Spirit Leopard, which gave it the ability to move mountains. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. Ignoring the leopard, he stared at the 2 complacent star golden rhinoceroses and said with a faint smile, "Oh? Is the innate divine ability of the star golden rhinoceros really so powerful?" With a flick of his finger, 360 beams of silver light suddenly shot out of the top of Wu Qi's head and quickly disappeared into the 360 star pearls hovering above him. Suddenly, the silver void, which had been shattered by the torrents spewed out of the star golden rhinoceros's horns, trembled. Amidst the rumbling of the stars, the silver torrents rolled back from all directions and completely froze the surrounding void in a blink of an eye. The 2-star golden rhinoceroses were horrified. Strange. Why can't we recognize the star power this guy is driving? Did he borrow the power of that star's origin? This. But, before they could say anything, the huge hand formed from the 9 nether ghost flame that Wu Qi had just unleashed had already grabbed the 2-star golden rhinoceroses, who were only 15th tier gold immortals, and casually thrown them into the dark Yin celestial tower. The Earth Spirit Leopard opened its mouth and swallowed them, then stabbed its sharp fangs into Wu Qi's neck. But, a thick layer of black dragon scales quickly crept out from under Wu Qi's skin, and sparks flew when the leopard's fangs and scales brushed against each other. Although Wu Qi's neck was unscathed, the leopard's fangs cracked and had tiny gaps. What a tough neck! The leopard gave a miserable howl and retreated hastily with blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. Wu Qi chuckled. The silver light that blotted the sky merged together, and then, 360 strange beasts, which no one had ever seen before, slowly revealed their true forms on the star pearls. The surging evil power of the stars whizzed down, and the trapped divine beasts were thrown to different places in the formation. Baizhu, who was taking a detoxifying pill, cried out in alarm as a silver vortex emerged around him and dragged him to the core of the formation, where the star pressure was the strongest. Wu Qi strode to Baizhu's side, grabbed the top of his head, and punched him again and again. The surrounding void trembled violently as dozens of divine beasts returned to their original forms and bombarded the formation with their strongest force, trying to break out of it. Wu Qi bore all the counterforce, causing his internal organs to tremble violently, and the taste of blood kept coming out of his mouth. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed Baizhu, whose cultivation base had been greatly weakened by the poison, and began to beat him violently. As he beat Baizhu, Wu Qi looked back in the direction of Yuxiong Plain in surprise. Why haven't the garrison of Yuxiong Plain arrived yet? Haven't they noticed what's going on here? Chapter 745. A dazzling ball of starlight enveloped an area of 100 miles in circumference. Above the clouds high up in the sky, numerous stars were visible in broad daylight. Wisps of starlight poured down from the sky like smoke, fusing into the ball of starlight. The silhouettes of dozens of divine beasts and fowls could be seen running and flying amidst the silver light, filling the air with jarring noises. The starlight was trembling, and from time to time, dozens of colorful beams would shoot out of it, turning the mountains in the near and far into nothingness. 1,000 miles away, on a lofty mountain, stood a pitch-black flagpole, over 30,000 meters tall. The huge flagpole was facing the strong wind in the sky, and a black flag that was 18,000 meters long and 9,000 meters wide was fluttering in the wind. Large clouds of black smoke spurted out from the flag, transforming into a huge, semi-transparent, hazy hand that covered the entire area with a circumference of 3,000 miles. All the energy fluctuations in the hand were absorbed by it, and not a single ripple or sound could be heard coming out of the void. However, looking down from the outside of the giant hand, everything was perfectly normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary at all. Whether it was divine sense, naked eyes, or some rare divine ability, none of them could see through what was happening in the void. Under the flag, Liu Bang and King Zhangqiu were sitting opposite each other on golden chairs carved with dragons. In front of them was a luxurious table about 10 feet long, on which all kinds of steaming, exquisite dishes were piled. These dishes were cooked on the spot by the expert chefs Liu Bang brought here, and all the ingredients were precious ingredients such as real dragon livers and phoenix gallbladders. A demon immortal, who had cultivated to the 18th tier heaven immortal realm in his true form of a tricolored deer, was howling and rolling on the mountainside. He had reverted to his true form, but the tendons of his limbs and his penis had been cut off, and more than 70% of his deer blood had been drained. He howled at the top of his lungs, but a demon-suppressing talisman produced by the Directorate of Celestials was stuck firmly on his forehead, rendering him incapable of doing anything other than screaming and rolling on the ground. Smilingly, Liu Bang scooped up a spoonful of steaming, delicious deer blood and hoof tendon soup from the pot in front of him. The tender, fresh and sweet deer blood slid down his throat like a piece of silk, while the extremely finely cut tendons in the blood were tender, elastic, fragrant and smooth. They seemed to explode in his mouth, bringing a thick fragrance and fresh taste that kept rolling up his throat. Marvelous! Liu Bang exclaimed. He glanced sideways at Deer Immortal, who was struggling and twisting on the mountainside, and casually waved his finger. Laughing heartily, Fan Kuai rushed over and stamped his foot on the deer's head, then pulled out a dagger and cut a piece of steaming deer meat from its chest. One of the guards brought him some strong wine. Fan Kuai ate the deer meat and drank the wine, and before long, he had finished all the meat on the deer's chest. This feels great. While laughing, Fan Kuai slapped his chest and stared fiercely at the mass of silver light that was fluctuating rapidly in the distance. With a smile on his face, King Zhangqiu picked up a piece of stir-fried deer penis with his chopsticks and put it into his mouth. Slowly chewing the steaming delicacy, he breathed a long sigh of contentment. Halfway up the mountain, a flood dragon, who had also cultivated to the realm of heaven immortal, was howling as a group of heavily armored elite soldiers pressed it against a boulder. A chef dressed in a cyan robe slowly walked up to the flood dragon. Holding a sharp butcher's knife, he slowly picked out the dragon tendons, liver, heart, and other precious ingredients from the flood dragon. Melodious music rang out from a nearby grove, and a group of female immortals in scantily clad came out of the grove, singing and dancing with long fans in their hands, performing a dance of heavenly fiends in front of King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang. The aroma of wine and meat wafted in the air, while beautiful women entertained them. King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang drank to their heart's content. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 different dishes with dragon meat as the main ingredient, Lu Bang finally put down the wine cup and turned to look at the dazzling mass of silver light in the distance. This young man is indeed extraordinary. Bai Zhu and the others are all gold immortals, and their true forms are extremely strong divine beasts. Yet, he was able to trap them all with a formation. No wonder King Zhangqiu wants to kill him here. King Zhangqiu wiped a drop of wine from the corner of his mouth and said with a cold grin, His Majesty favors him so much that he actually rewarded him with a supreme tower. Not only does he have the aptitude to cultivate both magic and fleshly body, but he is also Gao's man. If we don't take this opportunity to kill him, will we keep him alive to make things difficult for us in the future? With a lazy smile on his face, Lu Bang called over a delicate and beautiful female immortal and pulled her into his arms. He gently rubbed the 2 lumps of warm jade on the immortal's chest with both hands and sighed leisurely. Well, let him do whatever he wants. It will be great if he is killed by Bai Zhu and the others. But it will be great if he can kill Bai Zhu and the others. In short, we just don't let Bai Zhu and the others leave Yuxiong Plain alive. He laughed grimly, narrowed his eyes, and said with a cold snort, But, can we really do it by sacrificing a primordial immortal, a Buddha, and a few mediocre gold immortals and divine beasts? Not to mention that immortal Ding Jun has only joined the Buddhist League. Although he is no longer a primordial immortal, it will only take him a few years to become a Buddha. Do you really think such a trick can fool those people? Caressing the immortal in his arms as if nothing had happened, Lu Bang said in a flat voice, We just need to do it. As for what those almighty experts behind us think, it has nothing to do with us. Since they have made up the plan, they must have the confidence to succeed. Once it is done, I, Lu Bang, will certainly get some benefits, but don't tell me you won't get any benefits. Squinting at King Zhangqiu, Lu Bang said in a deep and powerful voice, Don't worry, Your Highness. Heaven and earth need a human emperor. But, what we need is a human emperor who can cooperate with us. Sooner or later, the throne will be yours, Your Highness. King Zhangqiu narrowed his eyes and smiled. Leaning back in the chair, Lu Bang said lazily, You just have to wait quietly, Your Highness. This is almost over. Even if Saint Empress Hua wholeheartedly protects the human race, even if she is made of iron, how many nails can she hit? This time, it is Yu who has angered the public. When those few patriarchs, who are as famous as Saint Empress Hua, come forward, she can only watch from beyond the heavens and can no longer interfere. Slapping hard on the plump butt of the fairy in his arms, Lu Bang said proudly, You can go anywhere in the world if you're right, but this time, you're right. King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang looked at each other and burst into laughter. At the same time, they looked up at the black flagpole standing between them, then glanced at the huge black flag fluttering in the wind with feverish eyes. The sky-veiling flag of chaos was the primordial immortal weapon of the Arctic Emperor of the Celestial Court, a primordial artifact born in the chaos. If Lu Bang had not borrowed a treasure of this level to conceal all the auras within 3,000 miles, how could the garrison of Yuxiong Plain not have discovered the conflict between Wuqi and Baizhu? But now, with this treasure, even the supreme oracles in Liangzhu could not detect what was happening here. Whether Wu Qi was killed by Bai Zhu and his companions, or Bai Zhu was killed by Wu Qi, it would be the most favorable outcome. Lao Tzu's tip-off to Bai Zhu and his companions was not in vain. TSK, it just so happened that Tan Lang was stopped. Lu Bang shook his head and laughed. Cultivating both fleshly body and magic. Getting the human emperor's appreciation and bestowing the supreme tower. Bah, why don't we kill such a genius as soon as possible so that he won't cause us trouble in the future? King Zhangqiu nodded in agreement. He swallowed a piece of dragon liver, then raised his wine cup high and said, "To the King of Han." With a smile on his face, Lu Bang kissed the female immortal in his arms, then raised his cup and cried out, "To your excellency." Both men looked at each other and laughed, then drank the wine in their cups. King Zhangqiu's interest was aroused as well. He grabbed a beautiful female immortal standing next to him and impatiently pressed her down on the chair. Before long, the woman's moans drifted out from the top of the hill. The eyes of Lu Bang, Zhang Liang, Han Xian, Xiao He, and the others who stood beside him, were filled with disdain at the same time. Narrowing his eyes, King Zhangqiu crazily sprinted toward the female immortal beneath him with a smile on his lips, and there was a cold sneer in his seemingly hazy eyes. Enveloped by the starlight spewing out of Dark-Een celestial tower, Wu Qi grabbed Bai Zhu's head and smashed him with his fists like a storm, causing him to howl and howl miserably. Bai Zhu's wife, a tigress who was equally fierce and ferocious, was roaring furiously. She had transformed into her true form of a white tiger and kept pouncing on Wu Qi, trying to save her husband. But Ao Buzan and the dragon python sisters were holding her back, not allowing her to get close to Wu Qi. Ao Buzan had shrunk his body to about an inch long, and was running around the tigress with a cheeky smile on his face, teasing her with a glib tone, "Your baby is dead, and now your husband is going to die. TSK, there's no hope for a widow with a dead son. Oh, you're a widow now. Why don't you just remarry? You're a white tiger, and Lao Tzu is a black dragon. The black and white dragon and tiger are a match made in heaven. Come, my dear, give me a kiss." Ao Buzan's filthy words made the tigress' hair stand on end with anger. She waved her claws and tried to tear Ao Buzan's body to pieces, but Ao Buzan was only an inch long, and her true form was too huge. So, how could she grab hold of Ao Buzan, who was several times more slippery than a loach? In particular, the dragon python sisters were constantly spurting out divine light of ice and fire to help her fight. Every beam of divine light of ice and fire forced the tigress to flee in a sorry state. There were also countless pearls condensed from starlight that rained down on her from all directions. Each pearl was as heavy as hundreds of mountains, and it made her feel unbearable pain all over her body. If she was not careful, she would be beaten until she rolled on the ground. In particular, these pearls condensed from starlight contained some wonderful power. Every time the tigress was hit, her eyes would be filled with illusions. Gradually, her mind began to blur, and she could no longer figure out where she was. The two white tigers were under Wu Qi's control, but the other divine beasts in the formation were roaring and roaring wildly as they kept attacking the base of the formation. Alone, Wu Qi was fighting against dozens of divine beasts, all of whom were above the gold immortal realm. Just maintaining the formation alone was already too much for him. Every impact directly shook Wu Qi's internal organs. Blood kept dripping from his 7 orifices, and his meridians were in severe pain as if they were being stirred by knives. Wu Qi looked up in surprise in the direction of Yuxiong Plain. Why hadn't anyone noticed what was happening here? All of a sudden, the silver light screen behind Wu Qi trembled and was shattered by a tremendous force. A flaming man came leaping over with a heavy blade in his hand, thrusting the blade towards Wu Qi's back. Chapter 746. Kill. It was obvious that the flaming man behind him had the bloodline of the fire phoenix. He was about 10 feet tall, and his face was blurred, but one could roughly see a sharp phoenix beak on his face. His body was almost completely transparent, like a red-hot glass, and a large sheet of clean, gentle flame was spraying out of his body. It was this seemingly harmless flame that, on the contrary, looked extraordinarily beautiful, but had burned through the star power barrier in Wuqi's formation. The heavenly flame of Phoenix was the only superior grade divine flame between heaven and earth that had evolved from acquired to innate. It had to be devoured by the imperial bloodline of the Phoenix clan with excellent aptitudes, then fuse with a wisp of innate fire spirit in the bloodline of the Phoenix, transforming all acquired flames into the invincible heavenly flame of Phoenix that could incinerate everything. It was also a flame that had a life of its own, and could create things. The blade in the flaming man's hand was produced out of thin air by the heavenly flame of Phoenix. It was not an illusory object, but a divine weapon forged from the divine iron of Phoenix condensed from the heavenly flame of Phoenix. This was the mystery of the heavenly flame of Phoenix. Ordinary phoenixes could only use the Nanming flame, which was one of the most powerful flames in the world. Only the imperial bloodline of the Phoenix clan could produce the heavenly flame of Phoenix. It was also one of the most mysterious flames in the world, and the Phoenix clan rarely showed it to the public. Wuqi's heart sank. Among these divine beasts who claimed that their children had died in the myriad poisons formation, there was actually an imperial bloodline of the Phoenix clan. This was a big problem. It was Wuqi who constructed the myriad poisons formation, and if he attracted the attention of the Phoenix clan, he would be in endless trouble. The Phoenix clan was the emperor of all the birds in the world. Even though divine birds such as Gale and Blue One sometimes did not obey the orders of the Phoenix clan, no one dared to underestimate the strength of the Phoenix clan. Although the current Phoenix clan was no longer as mighty and powerful as it was in the ancient times, and there were internal divisions in the Phoenix clan, such as the 5 great emperors on Panga continent and the Diyu dynasty, the identity of this flaming man was enough to give Wuqi a headache. Even 1/6 of the overall strength of the Phoenix clan was not something that Wuqi could withstand. Damn it! Why don't you take care of your son and let him run around? It's the father's fault for not teaching his son properly. Your son deserves to die. A stream of anger rushed straight to his head. From the dragon scales all over Wuqi's body, a clump of black flame that was as tranquil as melted glass spurted out. The sky-burning divine flame roared out, burning a large hole in the void behind him. The fire phoenix screeched and slashed its blade into the void behind Wuqi. He couldn't stop it in time and tumbled into the shattered void. Wuqi clasped his palms together, and a murderous look flashed across his face. In the next moment, a large amount of lightning flame condensed from chaotic energy smashed into the shattered void along with a deep, muffled whistle. Behind him, countless translucent white spherical bulges appeared in the 30 feet wide void. This was a phenomenon that could only be seen when the void barrier was shattered by his chaos divine thunder. Bai Zhu and his wife stared with their eyes wide open. How dare you kill Lord Fengheng, they roared in unison. Wuqi stamped his foot on Bai Zhu's head and roared, you can kill me, but don't tell me I can't kill you. With a casual wave of his hand, a beam of sky-burning divine flame transformed into a tiny blade shadow and cut through the void. Lord Fengheng howled and fell out of the void. His whole body was covered with twisted wounds. Obviously, the shattering of the void had caused him great harm. After all, although Lord Fengheng's bloodline was noble, his cultivation base was too low. A mere 12th-tier gold immortal was undoubtedly vulnerable to a single blow from Wuqi. Grabbing Lord Fengheng's head with one hand, Wuqi crushed it. A clump of black fiend flame rushed out of his palm, which quickly refined Lord Fengheng's body, burned his soul, and turned him into numerous golden blood crystals and purple soul crystals. Wuqi took a deep breath and absorbed the phoenix bloodline extracted from Lord Fengheng's body, which was several miles long and as thick as a water tank. It was the bloodline of the Phoenix imperial family. With a gentle breath, he inhaled the heavenly fire of Phoenix, which was trembling slightly where Lord Fengheng had disappeared. This was the real heavenly fire of Phoenix. There was no need for Wuqi to collect all kinds of acquired flames. Now, he already had the purest heavenly fire of Phoenix. In Bai Zhu's horrified eyes, Wuqi put his fingers together, and a sharp sword forged from the divine iron of Phoenix, which was transformed from the heavenly fire of Phoenix, was pressed against Baiju's forehead. Release your soul and let me imprison you, or you die, and I'll leave your wife to Ao Buzan. When Ao Buzan heard Wu Qi's words, saliva splashed out of the corner of his mouth. He cried out joyfully, "My lord has unified the universe, and his longevity is boundless. Kill that man, and after Lao Tzu has taught this woman a few days, I promise she will be obedient. She won't dare to go east, and she won't dare to kill a chicken." Wonderful, my beauty, here comes Lao Tzu. There was a time when Lao Tzu liked men like you. Baizhu and his wife roared angrily at the same time. Wu Qi pointed the sword at Baizhu. The high temperature of the heavenly fire of Phoenix burned Baiju's fur, and the sword sank between his eyebrows and pressed against his skull. "I don't know why your son appeared in the myriad poisons formation, and I'm not here for him." Wu Qi cried out in a deep voice. "To put it bluntly, if a son dies, he can have another one, but if you die, you will really have no descendants. Release your soul and let me imprison you, or else." Ao Buzan, can dragons and white tigers give birth to mixed bloods? Ao Buzan laughed strangely and cried out, "Generally speaking, it's impossible for a man to have sex once in a while. But Lao Tzu can have sex once in a while. At worst, Lao Tzu can have sex every night for a whole cultivation period. Surely, he can lay a few white tiger eggs, can't he? TSK, my beauty, as the saying goes, love grows with time. Why don't you just give in to me, Lao Tzu? Your husband will soon be a dead tiger, and Lao Tzu can soak his penis in wine." White tiger eggs. The faces of Baizhu and his wife darkened. It was well known that white tigers were viviparous, and only dragons were oviparous divine beasts. If a white tiger laid eggs, wouldn't it be the kind of crystal that Ao Buzan mentioned? As for soaking a certain part of Baiju's body in wine, Baiju's body began to tremble, and he felt a chill between his hind legs. "You can always have another son when your son is gone," Wu Qi said grimly as he slowly thrust the sword into Baiju's skull. Baizhu roared angrily, "I surrender." Lao Tzu surrenders. You'd better think it through. Lao Tzu is White Emperor's man. Ao Buzan, who had been arrogant and energetic just a moment ago, immediately lost his strength. He flew back to Wu Qi's shoulder weakly, threw his head back, and heaved a long sigh. "You're so disappointing. Don't you know that a man would rather die than submit? Baizhu, you still have a chance. You still have a chance to be a hero. Come on, you'd rather die than submit. You'll just be killed by my master, and then I'll take your wife, right?" As he spoke, Ao Buzan's interest was aroused again. He stood on Wu Qi's shoulder with his two hind paws, waved his hands and roared passionately, "Come on, Baizhu. Don't bring shame to the ancestors of your white tiger clan. Die like a hero. You'd rather die standing than live on your knees." Wu Qi cast a sidelong glance at Ao Buzan and snorted coldly. Baizhu and his wife looked at each other, their bodies trembling. Obviously, they were also struggling in their hearts. Wu Qi sneered and said coldly, "Oh, you'd rather die standing than live on your knees? Ao Buzan, you've taken Baiju's wife. Are you going to make her kneel or stand?" Ao Buzan's saliva flowed down from the corner of his mouth again. He narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Of course, she's going to lie on her knees." Baizhu and his wife were so angry that they spat out a mouthful of blood. Baizhu gnashed his teeth and roared, "Lao Tzu, Lao Tzu. I surrender." He knocked his head hard on the ground, and a beam of white light shot out from between his eyebrows. The soul of a white tiger was running wildly in the white light. Wu Qi snorted coldly, and a thin mark appeared between his eyebrows. A drop of his blood essence flew out and planted the most complicated and vicious restriction he knew in Baiju's primordial spirit. Then, Wu Qi did the same to Baiju's wife, Bai'er. The couple were forced to obey Wu Qi. They looked at each other for a while, then couldn't help but burst into tears. But, Lord Fengheng was brutally killed by Wu Qi right in front of them, and the tragic scene really frightened them. Coupled with Wu Qi's vicious and shameless threat, Bai Zhu and Bai Er did not have the courage to disobey Wu Qi's order. As the proud descendants of the White Tiger, they had no choice but to surrender. The formation began to tremble violently. The divine beasts were still attacking Wu Qi's formation with all their might. Another stream of blood gushed out of Wu Qi's 7 orifices. He gritted his teeth and shouted, then hurriedly took Bai Zhu and Bai Er to another fire phoenix in the formation, which was Lord Fengheng's wife. With the help of Bai Zhu and Bai Er, Wu Qi effortlessly used Bai Zhu and Bai Er to launch a sneak attack from behind, while he himself killed the phoenix head-on. As for Ao Buzan's request to keep the fire phoenix to warm his bed, Wu Qi chose to ignore it. Ao Buzan looked bitterly at Wu Qi, but when Wu Qi threw her all the blood and soul crystals extracted from the fire phoenix, Ao Buzan immediately rose to her feet in high spirits and began to flatter Wu Qi. Bai Zhu and Bai Er launched a sneak attack, while Wu Qi launched a frontal attack. One by one, Wu Qi subdued the remaining 42 divine beasts in the formation. But, he still planted a vicious restrictive spell in their nascent divinity, forcing these divine beasts, who all had the cultivation base of gold immortals, to submit to him. Together with the Star Golden Rhino couple who were trapped in Dark Yin Celestial Tower, Wu Qi now had 46 powerful divine beasts under his command, all of whom had the cultivation base of gold immortals or above. Looking at these powerful divine beasts complacently, Wu Qi put them all into Dark Yin Celestial Tower. Then, with a wave of his hand, he dispelled the celestial formation. The formation formed by 60 flying ships under Huang Liang's command gradually revealed itself amidst the starlight. More than 1,000 miles away, Lu Bang, who was enjoying a feast on a mountaintop, jumped to his feet in shock. That kid killed Bai Zhu and the others? How did he do it? Could it be that he's already a supreme high priest? King Zhangqiu, who was lying on the bodies of a few female immortals, jumped to his feet as well. Chapter 747. When Huang Liang and the 10,000 soldiers that Wu Qi had brought out of the East Sea province saw the blue sky and white clouds again, all of them breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. Wu Qi hovered in front of these flying ships. Dark Yin Celestial Tower was emitting beams of starlight that wrapped around Wu Qi, making him look like a deity made of starlight, radiating a light so bright that no one dared to look directly at him. At this moment, Huang Liang and the others really thought that Wu Qi was the reincarnation of some ancient god. They could not believe that he alone had killed dozens of divine beasts blocking their way, and even the hundreds of powerful spirit beasts they had brought with them were gone. Marquis of Province. Huang Liang drew his sword, pointed it at the sky, and cried out. One after another, the 10,000 soldiers drew their weapons and let out a deafening roar. Everyone looked at Wu Qi solemnly. From this moment on, Wu Qi's place in their hearts would be unshakable. Wu Qi took a deep breath. His eyes shone with a strange gleam, and in the blink of an eye, he glanced at all the mountains and hills within a radius of 10,000 miles. Under the gaze of his eyes, nothing could hide. In just the blink of an eye, he had fixed his eyes on Lu Bang and the others, who were standing on a mountaintop 1,000 miles away and staring at him with their mouths agape. Wu Qi smiled, a very happy smile. No wonder these aggressive divine beasts could accurately block his way, and no wonder they could get such accurate information. With King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang by his side, Wu Qi was too lazy to think about anything else. King Zhangqiu, you have colluded with immortals and plotted against the Marquis of Diyu province. You deserve to die. Come with me to Yangzhou now and confess your crimes. Wu Qi let out a deafening roar. A clump of 9 nether ghost flame towered into the sky from behind him, transforming into a giant hand that was a few miles in circumference. In a flash, it streaked across the sky and grabbed at Lu Bang and the others. With Wu Qi's current cultivation base, he did not care about the strength of Lu Bang and the others at all. He was confident that he could easily capture them alive and interrogate them for some extremely confidential information. The fact that Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu were sitting opposite each other and having a feast was strange no matter how one looked at it, and the mystery behind it was very valuable. Wu Qi also saw the flagpole standing between Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu. He also saw the flag emitting a faint black smoke that blanketed an area 3,000 miles in circumference. Without a doubt, the delay of the garrison in Yuxiong Plain must have something to do with this flag. Beside Wu Qi, the dragon python sisters had also transformed into giant creatures that were a few miles long. Lightly flapping their translucent wings, they opened their mouths and shot out two beams of divine light, one gold and the other silver. The beams intertwined with each other and turned into two spiral-shaped beams of light that shot toward the mountaintop. At the same time, Wu Qi waved his hand and sent all the flying ships behind him into his chaotic interstitial world, except for the jade-armored dark turtle flying ship with the strongest defense. He sent all the soldiers in the ships to the last one, the jade-armored dark turtle flying ship, while the Darkeen celestial tower burst out a great sheet of starlight to envelop the flying ship as well. A few fiend shadows darted out from under Wu Qi's feet and plunged silently into the ground without alerting anyone, concealing all their auras and hiding in the depths of the earth. Even before the fight with Lu Bang and the others began, Wu Qi was fully prepared. He did not know the origin of the huge flagpole and the flag, but he had a bad feeling about it. For the sake of safety, he had to be prepared to deal with any changes. Huang Liang and the other captains and soldiers were part of Wu Qi's foundation, and he could not let them die in vain. Therefore, he had to protect them well. As for the few celestial fiend puppets, they would be able to send some messages to Princess Zhanglu should Wu Qi encounter some irresistible force and be trapped. Wu Qi was confident that even if he was really trapped by some formation used by Lu Bang and others, as long as Princess Zhanglu was in charge of the situation, she would not let the East Sea province fall into chaos, and would find a way to help him as much as possible. The giant hand formed from the 9 nether ghost flame was the first to arrive, but the divine light of ice and fire unleashed by the dragon python sisters was less than 10 miles away from the mountaintop. Lu Bang smiled contemptuously. He patted the thigh of the female immortal next to him, then pointed at the sky-veiling flag of chaos. Smiling, he said to King Zhangqiu, "Those livestock are killed, and Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province who is highly appreciated by the human emperor, is missing as well. Do you think there is a better result than this, Your Highness? Those livestock are the true descendants of the 3 old fogies in the east, north, and west." Smiling, King Zhangqiu spread the legs of a petite female immortal and placed them on his body. While enjoying the beautiful body of the female immortal, he burst out laughing and said, "It couldn't be better. The current human emperor is indecisive, but also headstrong. Now that the genius he admires the most has suddenly gone missing, he can't just swallow his anger. When the time comes, as long as we add fuel to the fire, he will have no choice but to fall into our trap." Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu were laughing complacently, but they did not know that not only could Wu Qi see every slightest movement of their lips from thousands of miles away, but Wu Qi was also proficient in lip reading. Wu Qi had captured every word of their conversation. Wu Qi could not help but wonder, what kind of plan do they have? How could they trap the Eastern Green Emperor, the Northern Black Emperor, and the Western White Emperor, 3 figures who had existed since the ancient times, and the current human emperor? What means does Lu Bang have to make me go missing? Just as Wu Qi was wondering, high up in the sky, beyond the green underworld, a huge star suddenly burst out with a dazzling light. Then, another star burst out with a dazzling light that lit up the whole sky, and then more and more stars burst out with blinding flames. A total of 7 stars hung high up in the sky, forming the pattern of a spoon that Wu Qi was very familiar with, stealing the light from all the other stars. But, as soon as the light of these 7 stars shone, in the direction right in front of the handle of the spoon, a large star that was hundreds of times brighter than all 7 stars combined burst out with a bright light that blanketed the whole sky. A total of 8 beams of silver light came whistling down from the sky and were swallowed by the sky-veiling flag of chaos. The originally pitch-black flagpole and the flag were covered with a dazzling silver light at the same time, and the star patterns of the Big Dipper and the North Star quietly appeared on the flag. The divine light of ice and fire shot out by the dragon python sisters was gently swept up by the flag and disappeared. But, just as the giant hand condensed from the 9 nether ghost flame flew over the mountaintop, the flag swayed slightly, and a silver torrent soared into the sky, rolling up the pitch-black hand and disappearing without a trace. Before Wu Qi could do anything else, Lu Bang gently flicked his finger. Immediately, a strong beam of light 10 miles in diameter shot out from the sky-veiling flag of chaos, falling beside Wu Qi and the others in an instant. A loud boom rang out as the void within a radius of several hundred miles around Wu Qi and the others collapsed. Wu Qi and everything around him were sucked into the collapsing void. Along with them were dozens of mountains of different sizes and vast tracts of land. Fortunately, after Wu Qi's celestial fiend puppets plunged into the ground, they quickly went far away along with the flow of natural energy in the underground energy veins. Otherwise, they would have been sucked into the void as well, and at that time, there would be no one to inform them. With the strike of the sky-veiling flag of chaos, Wu Qi and the others were sucked into the void. The silver light swirled around the shattered void for a while, and in the blink of an eye, it had completely mended the broken void. Lu Bang chuckled and waved his hand. The sky-veiling flag of chaos transformed into a small flag and fell into his hand. Then, he sprinkled a sheet of silver light that swept up everything on the mountaintop, including the dismembered flood dragon and deer immortal, leaving not even a hair behind. Then, the company quickly disappeared amidst the silver light. Right after Lu Bang and the others disappeared, the 18 supreme towers soundlessly broke through the void and arrived above the mountaintop. A cold, emotionless voice rang out, "Which fellow immortal from the celestial court is here? Stay here. Is this a place where you can come and go as you please?" Accompanied by the gloomy voice, an invisible, bizarre force quietly rang out along with the shrill howl of ghosts. The mountain where Lu Bang and the others had been standing just now turned into ashes and dissipated silently. Then, the mountains and rivers within a radius of 1,000 miles, including several small villages, disintegrated as well. Except for those farmers who were at a loss, everything else, including their clothes, was annihilated by the bizarre force. The joint attack of the 18 supreme oracles shook Lu Bang and the others, who had been swept away by the sky-veiling flag of chaos, and blood sprayed out from all over their bodies at the same time. Some people with weaker cultivation bases, such as the few female immortals around Lu Bang, as well as the maids and cooks they brought with them, exploded and turned into blood that sprayed all over the sky. Fortunately, the sky-veiling flag of chaos was extremely mysterious. Although it was controlled by Lu Bang and could not exert any of its power, it still brought Lu Bang, King Zhangqiu, and the others into the void and fled without being discovered by these supreme oracles who had sensed something was amiss. In just 10 minutes, the news that Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province, had been attacked and his whereabouts were unknown quickly spread across Liangzhu. At this moment, Wu Qi was standing in the main control cabin of a jade-armored dark turtle flying ship, his hands clasped tightly around a huge crystal that stood hundreds of feet tall in front of him, constantly injecting all his strength into it. The huge jade-armored dark turtle flying ship was wrapped in a layer of light that looked like a turtle shell, and was flying through the dark, unknown turbulence of space like a straw. Inside the cabin, Huang Liang and the other 10,000 soldiers were unconscious. They were knocked out by the impact when the void was broken, and if it were not for the ship's protection, they would have been crushed into meat pies by the pressure brought by the swift and violent turbulence of space outside. The chaotic energy in Wu Qi's body was rapidly depleting, and just as his strength was about to be depleted, the huge flying ship trembled violently and plunged headlong through a thick, dark barrier that stretched for billions of miles, plunging into a strange world where hundreds of blood-red moons hung in the dark sky. Wave after wave of gloomy and evil aura kept coming from all directions. The flying ship dispersed the evil aura, stirred up large ripples, and crashed heavily into the middle of a huge mountain that stood tens of thousands of miles tall, sinking deep into the dark mountain. Wu Qi took a deep breath and gasped violently for a few moments. Damn it, where have I been taken? Chapter 748. The violent impact did not leave a scratch on the shell of the ship. The shell of this prehistoric beast did not disappoint. On the contrary, the decks and cabins constructed by the military court were twisted, and some of the energy transmission arrays were damaged. A large amount of energy was flowing out of these damaged arrays, while the turtle shell-shaped light screen on the ship's surface was gradually fading away. Wu Qi cursed under his breath, swaying and shaking his dizzy head. Then, he trod on the wrinkled and uneven deck and came before the energy core. Then, he threw a punch at the thick alloy armor outside the energy core, sinking Wu Qi's fist deep into the hard armor, which was mainly composed of the raw materials used to forge heaven immortal artifacts. Accompanied by a shrill tearing noise, the 10 feet thick armor was torn apart by Wu Qi, revealing the twisted energy core, which was undergoing a violent reaction. 360 floating rune arrays were colliding with each other in the energy core, which was 3 miles in diameter. Normally, these rune arrays would hover in a fixed position inside the energy core instead of colliding with each other randomly like this. When the arrays collided with each other, a blinding light burst out. When the light, which contained the power of runes, fell onto a pile of immortal stones and spirit stones floating in the center of the energy core, it immediately stirred up a huge amount of energy that flowed like water. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. The damnable impact had destroyed the network of formations that were used to send out the energies, and prevented the energies from flowing out freely in the energy cores, causing them to accumulate in this place. If he had not come here immediately after the collision, it would not have taken long for this energy core, which was piled up like a small hill about a mile in diameter, to explode. Of course, the outer turtle shell would not be damaged by such an explosion, but Huang Liang and the others inside the cabin would be dead for sure. Cursing under his breath, Wu Qi waved his hand and stored the pile of immortal stones and energy stones, which were constantly releasing a tremendous power, into his interstitial world. He opened his mouth and took a deep breath, sucking in all the enormous energy that had been released. It was roughly equal to all the immortal energy in the body of 300 ordinary heaven immortals, but for Wu Qi, who was already a 5th-tier gold immortal, it was only enough to replenish a little of the energy he had just lost. Then, he exercised a mental cultivation technique and transformed the energy he absorbed into chaotic energy, then strode out of the control cabin. On the first floor near the bridge, Huang Liang and the other soldiers were lying on the ground. Wu Qi frowned and patted Ao Buzan on the head. Ao Buzan let out a weird laugh, opened his mouth, and spurted out a stinky black water wave. As the black water swept past, Huang Liang and the others screamed and jumped to their feet as they kept coughing out stinky black water. Wu Qi gave a soft cry, and the soldiers stopped what they were doing. Although all the immortal stones and energy stones in the energy cores had been taken away by Wu Qi, and the cabin had become dark and gloomy, with the help of the pearls mounted on the sabers carried by Huang Liang and the other officers, the cabin was illuminated with a faint light, and the people could still see everything around them. Huang Liang cleared his throat, then carefully came up to Wu Qi and asked respectfully, "What happened, Marquis?" Wu Qi shook his head and said with a frown, "We were ambushed just now. Someone used a magical treasure to tear open the void and throw us into this damned place. I was afraid that you couldn't protect the flying ship, so I rushed into the ship and took control of it. I don't know where it is now." Stamping his foot, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about it. Everyone, get out of here. This flying ship is damaged, and it can't be used without major repairs. Get out and change flying ships, then find out where we are and find a way to leave this place." Huang Liang wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Instead, he gave a loud shout and ordered the soldiers to line up and leave the cabin. Wu Qi was the last to go out. He put away the damaged flying ship. Leading the army, he walked along a 100-mile-long tunnel that the flying ship had created on the mountain. After walking for a while, a strong gust of wind suddenly blew in front of them. Under the blood-red moonlight, a wild continent appeared in front of them. They were standing at the entrance of a huge cave, which was naturally the result of the flying ship's collision just now. Looking up, they saw a black mountain towering into the clouds, and looking down, they saw an abyss that was tens of thousands of miles deep. All the soldiers present, including Huang Liang and the other captains, could only see hundreds of blood-red moons of different sizes in the sky, and the dark mist and dark clouds in the surroundings. Apart from that, they could not see anything else. But in Wu Qi's eyes, he could see a lot more. With a casual glance, he could see a grain of sand hundreds of thousands of miles away. Even though the sky was filled with hazy dark mist and thick dark clouds, it could not obstruct his vision. The mountain they were on was smooth and smooth, like a glaze that had been smeared with oil. It was a very strange stone, as if it had been washed by some invisible energy. It was so smooth that it could be used as a mirror. Wu Qi sent his divine sense into the mountain. These black stones were a great obstacle to divine sense. Even with Wu Qi's overall strength, his divine sense could only penetrate less than 1 mile into the mountain. The mountain was part of a huge mountain range. Wu Qi spread his divine will in all directions, and he found that behind them was a huge mountain range that stretched for an unknown number of miles. At least, with the current strength of Wu Qi's divine sense, he could not completely cover this mountain range. In front of the crowd, as far as Wu Qi could see, was a black desert. Dark hills, dark deserts, and dark deserts. Occasionally, a few dark yellow rivers would flow quietly through them. Along the banks of these rivers, the carcasses of countless monsters who had died tragically could be seen lying in disorder. These monsters came in all shapes and sizes. Not only on Panga continent, there was no record of them even in the universal strange objects found in Scroll of Stealing. Not far away from the foot of the mountain, a few monsters that looked like ferocious wolves but had huge bodies, about 300 feet long and covered with sharp bone spikes, were attacking a huge monster that measured about 4,000 feet long, looked like a giant caterpillar, and was also covered with a thick black shell. The monster was wriggling its body and moving forward at a high speed. The monsters kept running around it, reaching out their claws and tearing at its body from time to time. Occasionally, when one of the claws ripped open the monster's shell, a large amount of black blood would spray out. The blood was extremely corrosive. Wu Qi saw a few huge rocks that were hit by the blood emit thick white smoke, and in the blink of an eye, they were corroded into puddles of liquid. The giant beast was in pain. A row of strange patterns that looked like human eyes grew on the middle of its body. Every time its carapace was torn open, a few of the patterns would spew out a large amount of poisonous gas, spreading in all directions. The few monsters seemed to know how dangerous the poisonous smoke was. Every time it sprayed out, they would nimbly dodge to the side, avoiding a head-on confrontation with the monster. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head as he glanced at these huge creatures with his divine will. Although their bodies were huge, their cultivation bases were very low, not even reaching the realm of Jin Dan. They were just some ordinary wild beasts, not even demon beasts. However, their physical strength was not weak, probably comparable to a nascent soul cultivator who specialized in body tempering. Just a casual attack from the few monsters that looked like ferocious wolves could carry a force of several 100,000 kilograms. What a damned place! Wu Qi cursed under his breath. There was not the slightest natural energy in the air here, only a gloomy and evil air that seemed to carry a strange life force, but it was very different from the life forces that Wu Qi was familiar with. Apart from the hundreds of blood-red moons, there was nothing else in the sky, and there was no earth veins or natural energy beneath the ground. There were only pitch-black crypts that rolled and churned with a gloomy and evil aura scattered in all directions. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi waved his hand and shot out a ball of black flame, from which flew out an undamaged jade-armored dark turtle flying ship and hovered in front of everyone. Huang Liang, said Wu Qi in a deep voice, all soldiers, board the ship at once and distribute the powerful weapons gifted by King Yufeng to everyone. Be on high alert at all times. God knows what kind of place this is. We need to find a way to leave this place. Huang Liang answered, and all the soldiers quickly boarded the ship. A large number of weapons gifted by Gao were stored in the ship's storeroom, including all kinds of powerful bone talismans and bows, as well as tens of thousands of sets of heavy armors with amazing defensive power. Meanwhile, Wu Qi ordered all the soldiers to change into the heavy armors that Gao had obtained through private channels. Originally, only the imperial guards of Liangzhu were entitled to issue them. The heavy armors calmed the soldiers' hearts. At least, their safety was greatly guaranteed. No matter what kind of damned place this was, with the protection of the jade armor dark turtle flying ship, the powerful armors that only the imperial guards of Diyu could issue to them, and all kinds of powerful bows, bone talismans, and other weapons, what kind of situation could they not handle? After closing all the cabin doors of the flying ship, leaving only a few windows for looking out, Wu Qi stood on the bridge and gave the order to set off. The flying ship flew very cautiously, almost sticking close to the ground, until it was only less than a mile above the ground. In such a strange place, Wu Qi would rather let the soldiers deal with the dangers from the ground than fight the enemies in the sky. After all, not many of the 10,000 soldiers had the strength to fly in the sky, and fighting the enemies in the sky would undoubtedly be the most dangerous. After flying for a day and a night, when they were about 100 miles away from the nearest Yellow River, Wu Qi finally knew where this place was. A few giant heavenly ghosts that Wu Qi had met in the capital city of Yen Kingdom on Myriad Immortals planet were jumping and running from a distance. They were chasing after a giant monster that was fleeing in panic, as if they were hunting for food. Damn it, they sent us to the ghost realm. Wu Qi's face turned extremely unsightly. Chapter 749. Under Wu Qi's gaze, the few heavenly ghosts rushed to the giant beast they had hunted like a gust of wind. Their sharp claws, teeth, and tails left countless huge wounds on the beast's body. In just a few breaths of time, the giant beast, which was several miles long, had been devoured by the few heavenly ghosts, and a great deal of blood gushed out of its mouth. Before long, 2 heavenly ghosts crawled out of the beast's mouth. Obviously, they had destroyed the beast's internal organs and killed its vitality. Even Wu Qi, who had a gloomy face, could not help but nod in admiration. These heavenly ghosts were much stronger than the one that had appeared in Ji City many years ago, and the gap in their strength was like the gap between a baby and an adult tiger. In terms of speed, strength, and ferocity, the few heavenly ghosts in front of him were far superior to the one Wu Qi had seen in the past. Even the giant beast they hunted had the overall strength of a heaven immortal, but they were easily killed by them. A few heavenly ghosts squeezed out of the giant beast's body happily, threw their heads back and roared joyfully, then gave a surprised look at the jade armor dark turtle flying ship, which was hovering in the sky dozens of miles away. Then, they waved their claws disapprovingly and leaped happily onto the giant beast's body. After devouring the beast's flesh and blood, the few heavenly ghosts cooperated with each other and dragged the nearly 3 miles long giant beast into the distance. At Wu Qi's order, the flying ship quietly followed behind the few heavenly ghosts. He even used his divine sense to gather a large patch of dark clouds in the distance and had them hover around the ship. Then, he laid down all kinds of restrictive spells to prevent divine sense from peeping into the ship. For a moment, the huge dark clouds drifted behind the few heavenly ghosts, but they knew nothing about it as they dragged the giant beast upstream along a great river. The giant beast's heavy body left visible marks on the ground, and its blood flowed into the river in gurgling streams. The pungent smell of blood caused the creatures in the river to riot, and from time to time, large fish and aquatic beasts with heavy bony armor could be seen leaping out of the river. These big fish and aquatic beasts had ferocious faces and terrifying strength. Although they couldn't walk out of the water, they still leaped out of the water and madly roared at the few heavenly ghosts who were walking quickly on the shore. The few hundreds of meters long fishes widely opened their mouths. Their sharp teeth reflected the blood-red moonlight, shining brightly. They closed their mouths, and their teeth clashed against each other, causing a silvery cracking noise. A few large fishes even spat out light yellow streams of water from their bellies with all their might, darting for miles like sharp arrows and leaving huge holes on the dead beast's body. The few heavenly ghosts did not take these big fish and aquatic beasts seriously. They chattered and laughed, stopping from time to stand on the shore and twist their hips to provoke the creatures in the river. Wu Qi could not help but be surprised. According to the legends of immortal cultivators, these heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm were ferocious by nature and had no intelligence. They acted entirely on instinct. But looking at the free and unrestrained appearance of these heavenly ghosts, they were no different from human naughty teenagers. Although they looked a little ferocious, they did things in an orderly manner and did not give off the feeling that they had lost their spiritual wisdom and were muddle-headed. Everyone in the world is like this. Wu Qi shook his head inwardly. It was very likely that the ghost realm had caused great casualties to immortal cultivators in the past, so all the immortal cultivators were deliberately discrediting the existence of the ghost realm. Perhaps the heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm were indeed ferocious monsters who only knew how to kill, but perhaps there were also individuals with extremely high intelligence among them? At least, judging from the performance of these few heavenly ghosts, Wu Qi hoped that the heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm were not the legendary monsters. He hoped that he could meet some intelligent and cultured heavenly ghosts, and perhaps they would be the hope for Wu Qi to leave this place with his subordinates. He wondered if the East Sea City had received the news that he was missing. Princess Zhanglu must keep the situation under control, and she must not rashly avenge me. King Zhangqiu was the prince of Diyu, and he was supported by King Baishan. As for Liu Bang, that old rascal and old lecher, since they had colluded with each other to plot against Wu Qi, how could they let go of the East Sea province that was under Wu Qi's name? Perhaps they would find an excuse to go to the East Sea province and stir up trouble. If Liu Bang saw Princess Zhanglu and had that kind of idea, with a sinister laugh, Wu Qi gritted his teeth and said, "If you dare to touch even a hair of Lao Tzu's people, Lao Tzu will wipe out your whole family." The sudden surge of thoughts made Wu Qi's killing intent surge. Huang Liang and the others were startled by Wu Qi's sudden burst of cold air. They stood where they were and dared not to move, controlling the flying ship to fly forward with a straight face. No one dared to make a sound, lest they offend Wu Qi, who had suddenly lost his temper and taught him a lesson for no reason. Clenching his fists so tightly that they made cracking noises, Wu Qi strode up to the transparent crystal wall in front of the bridge. He lightly tapped the crystal wall with his fingertips. Immediately, numerous runes, dozens of triangles, squares, and other three-dimensional patterns emerged on the surface of the light blue crystal wall, which was about 10 feet thick like a puddle of clear water. A wisp of Wu Qi's divine sense was sent into the crystal wall. After being magnified and purified by the restrictive formation, it transformed into an invisible wave that swept across tens of thousands of miles in a flash, recording the topographic map of the area into a huge soul crystal inside the flying ship. This was the special feature of the flying ships of Diyu's military court. They could quickly scan and record the topography of unfamiliar areas. As long as dozens of flying ships were sent out, they could record the topography of a large area in a very short period of time for the army to march and fight. Now that Wu Qi and his subordinates had been dragged into the ghost realm, he had to make all kinds of preparations. He could not take care of the affairs in the East Sea province for the time being. The most important thing now was to bring Huang Liang and his subordinates back to Panga continent safely. Huang Liang, pass down my orders to all the brothers. The place we are in now is the legendary ghost realm, a place where only death awaits. Let all the brothers remember that the man who dragged us into this realm is King Zhangqiu, the son of King Baishan of Diyu. He has colluded with the immortals of the celestial court, and has committed many shady deeds that have harmed Diyu. This time, they have schemed against us, intending to kill us. All the men of East Sea will never let them go. As long as we can get out of the ghost realm, we will make him bleed for 5 steps, and he will give us an explanation. Wu Qi's voice was cold and murderous. It sounded like 2 pieces of metal colliding with each other, bringing with it a terrible aura of fighting on a battlefield. Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, Huang Liang and the others could not help but have their hair stand on end. At the same time, a great rage rose from the bottom of their hearts. Who was King Zhangqiu? The Prince of Diyu. The Prince of Diyu had colluded with the immortals of the celestial court to plot against the Marquis of Diyu, and sent 10,000 soldiers who had made great contributions in the crusade against myriad immortal alliance into the ghost realm. There was no need to say anything more. Huang Liang and the others strode out of the bridge and told the 10,000 soldiers what Wu Qi had said. Before long, deafening roars began to reverberate and collide violently in the jade armor dark turtle flying ship. All the soldiers were roaring, 5 steps of blood, an eye for an eye. Wu Qi snorted coldly. Now that he was out of the ghost realm, there were some things that he had to do quickly and decisively. Otherwise, would the people in the world still think he was a pushover? They had come to him again and again. Could it be that he, Wu Qi, was not allowed to wield his blade and kill people? After obtaining the cultivation base of a 5th-tier gold immortal and subduing a group of gold immortals such as Bai Zhu and Bai Er, Wu Qi was emboldened, and his desire to compromise and struggle for survival gradually faded away. The flying ship flew slowly forward. Several heavenly ghosts happily dragged the huge monster forward. After running for more than 10 hours, they finally came to a valley surrounded by several mountains in the upper reaches of the river. Standing on the bridge and looking into the distance, Wu Qi could not help but be overjoyed. There were crude buildings made of boulders in the valley. Although they looked crooked like a dog's kennel, they were indeed buildings. Since these heavenly ghosts could build buildings, it was obvious that they had a certain level of intelligence. And Wu Qi also saw a large pit on one side of the valley, in which many pale black bones were piled up. These heavenly ghosts had learned to store the bones of their prey together, so the valley was clean and there were no messy bones scattered around. This awareness of environmental sanitation was also a sign of their intelligence. Wrapped in thick dark clouds, the flying ship slowly flew over the valley and hovered a few miles above the ground. The sky above the valley was already filled with dark clouds and black smoke, but even with the addition of the dark clouds brought by Wu Qi, it did not look strange at all. When the few heavenly ghosts were still a few miles away from the narrow passage at the entrance of the valley, they let out a shrill howl. Immediately, dozens of small and seemingly youthful heavenly ghosts rushed out of the valley, chirping and leaping toward the few heavenly ghosts. With the efforts of dozens of heavenly ghosts, the huge monster was soon transported into the valley. From the crooked and dilapidated buildings, a group of trembling heavenly ghosts with missing arms, legs, and tails walked out. They grunted with joy and slowly walked to the square in the middle of the valley to help cut the monster into pieces. When Wu Qi's divine sense swept across the valley, which was about 100 miles long and wide, he could not help but widen his eyes in surprise. Apart from the few heavenly ghosts who were out hunting and could be considered young men, there were only dozens of small heavenly ghosts in the valley, who could be considered teenagers and children. As for those heavenly ghosts with missing arms and legs, there were about 100 of them, but they were absolutely not young men. This was not the population ratio that a normal race should have. A few strong young men, dozens of children, and a large group of old men. Wu Qi furrowed his brows. What was going on? Just as Wu Qi was frowning and thinking, a shrill and unpleasant ghost howl suddenly came from afar. Wu Qi hurriedly swept his divine sense in that direction and saw that about 100 miles away, about 300 strong heavenly ghosts covered in green blood were being chased by more than 1,000 fierce and ferocious heavenly ghosts all the way to the valley. When the heavenly ghosts in the valley heard the howl, all of them rushed to the end of the narrow passage at the entrance of the valley and assumed a defensive posture. From time to time, they let out shrill howls, echoing the sounds of the heavenly ghosts in the distance. It took only a few breaths of time for these heavenly ghosts to cover a distance of over 100 miles. Before long, the 300 or so heavenly ghosts had rushed into the valley. As soon as they entered, they turned around and joined the other heavenly ghosts in defending the narrow passage to the death. As they approached the valley, the 1,000-odd heavenly ghosts slowed down. Grinning grimly, they pressed toward the valley step by step. Chapter 750. After instructing Huang Liang and the others to wait in the flying boat, Wu Qi flashed out of the boat. Casually, he pulled out a dark cloud and coiled it around his body, then began to descend slowly. Slowly, he came to a height of less than 1 mile from the ground, nearly touching the mountains on both sides of the valley's exit. As soon as he approached the top of the mountain, Wuqi's body swayed and he was nearly sucked into the top of the mountain. Although the pitch-black mountains surrounding the valley were not very tall, they came with a strange suction force, and even with Wuqi's overall strength, he nearly made a fool out of himself. He roughly estimated the strength of the suction force and concluded that these heavenly ghosts in front of him could not pass through the mountains safely. If they dared to enter or leave the valley from the top of the mountain, they would be firmly sucked to the top of the mountain and unable to move. Worse still, their bodies might not be able to withstand the great suction force, and their internal organs would be crushed to a pulp. Only then did Wuqi understand why the heavenly ghosts in the valley were only guarding the narrow passage, which was less than 100 feet wide, and why the heavenly ghosts outside the mountain were only baring their fangs and brandishing their claws at the other end of the passage. None of them dared to take a detour into the valley and attack the enemy from the back. Wuqi carefully studied the two groups of heavenly ghosts inside and outside the valley. The body lines of the group in the valley were softer, and the bone spurs on their backs were more exquisite and sharp, like polished jade. These heavenly ghosts in the valley gave off a strange sense of beauty. Their eyes were more lively, and there were sparks of wisdom flashing in them. They were stationed on one side of the narrow passage, and Chi-Chi could see the embryonic form of a military formation. However, the group of more than 1,000 heavenly ghosts outside the valley had bodies that looked like lumps of stone that had just been mined from the mountains. Their bodies were in a mess, and their muscles and bones were twisted together in a strange way. The bone spurs on their bodies were rough, and some of them seemed to have just been broken and had not yet regrown. The eyes of these heavenly ghosts were cloudy and filled with the brutal and ferocious aura of wild beasts. Their mouths were constantly dripping water, and from time to time, they let out deep and meaningless roars. These heavenly ghosts were running back and forth outside the narrow passage, trying to rush into the valley, but they seemed to be afraid of something. Their messy formation made them look like a group of wild beasts, and they could not be compared to the heavenly ghosts in the valley. After a moment of hesitation, over 100 heavenly ghosts threw their heads back and let out long roars, then rushed into the narrow passage that was tens of miles long like a gust of wind. They ran as fast as they could, and some of them even ran on the mountain walls that were perpendicular to the ground. They spat saliva and let out muffled roars, their eyes glinting with blood-red light as they pounced on the heavenly ghosts in the valley. The widest part of the narrow passage was only about 200 feet, and these heavenly ghosts were so huge that even at the widest part, they could only line up 4 or 5 heavenly ghosts shoulder to shoulder. It was even more difficult for these heavenly ghosts to maintain their formation when they were running at high speed. By the time they reached the middle of the passage, the invading heavenly ghosts could only run forward one after another, no longer having the momentum of a group charge. The heavenly ghosts in the valley let out deep roars, and when the first enemy rushed out of the passage, more than a dozen heavenly ghosts pounced on him at the same time. Tacitly, they launched a fierce attack on the enemy who had rushed out of the passage, slashing at the enemy with dozens of sharp claws and powerful long tails. A miserable howl rang out as the first heavenly ghost to rush out of the passage was torn to pieces on the spot. The other heavenly ghosts rolled on the ground in unison, while the trembling old heavenly ghosts behind them puffed out their chests at the same time and opened their mouths to spit out large sheets of green flame. These were the natal ghost flames of the heavenly ghosts who had once put Wuqi and others in a sorry state in Ji City. They were extremely filthy and destructive. Accompanied by shrill ghost howls, dozens of 100-feet-thick ghost flames filled almost the entire passage, enveloping more than 100 heavenly ghosts in the passage at the same time. Their fleshly bodies had begun to wither, but the natal flames accumulated in them were several times stronger than those of the young and strong heavenly ghosts. The heavenly ghosts in the narrow passage were struggling and twitching in the monstrous flames. Although the ghostly flames were spurted out from the bodies of the heavenly ghosts, their natal ghostly flames were extremely lethal even to themselves. More than 100 heavenly ghosts were blocked by the flames in the narrow passage and burned crazily. There was really no way out for them. Before long, all the heavenly ghosts in the narrow passage were burned to a pulp. Apart from the dozens of heavenly ghosts at the back who fled with their bodies covered in flames, the other 30 or so heavenly ghosts at the front had been reduced to a puddle of pus. The ghostly fire ignited the pus that the heavenly ghosts had turned into, and just like adding a ladle of oil to a spark, the flames in the narrow passage grew stronger and stronger. But, such a fierce ghost flame could not burn the mountain walls on either side. Wu Qi was shocked. It seemed that the mountain wall was not an ordinary thing. Not only did it have such a strange and powerful gravitational force, but it was also impervious to the attack of the ghost flames. The heavenly ghosts outside the valley roared into the sky in exasperation for a while. Then, they leaped forward to put out the ghost flames on their companions who were burned and lucky enough to escape, then stood at the mouth of the passage, shouting and provoking desperately. However, the heavenly ghosts in the valley did not budge at all and just guarded the narrow valley path. Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then sent a voice transmission to Huang Liang inside the flying ship. Inside the jade-armored dark turtle flying ship, Huang Liang roared and issued an order to the soldiers inside. Tens of thousands of small windows on both sides of the ship opened one by one, and the soldiers stood behind the windows with crossbows in their hands, looking down at the thousands of heavenly ghosts who were roaring wildly a few miles down below. These soldiers were using Dayu's standard bone-piercing crossbows, which were specially designed for large-scale killing. Each crossbow could shoot 36 bolts at once, which were specially made from the bones of a demon beast, Akabane Dahong. They flew extremely fast, more than 10 times faster than the sword beams of ordinary heaven immortals. Because of their incredible speed and the meticulously polished bolts inscribed with a large number of piercing runes, the bone-piercing crossbow, as its name suggested, had a very strong penetrating power. Even an ordinary heaven immortal with an immortal artifact would not be able to withstand the volley of bolts, let alone these heavenly ghosts. At Huang Liang's order, 10,000 bone-piercing crossbows fired at once. 360,000 specially made bone bolts, which were polished to the size of 10 hairs and no more than 1 foot and 2 inches long, shot out silently, covering the distance of a few miles in just 1,000th of a second. The bolts covered an area of several miles down below, leaving no blind spots. All of a sudden, the thousands of heavenly ghosts stopped moving. Their bodies stiffened, and countless tiny arrows of blood shot out of their bodies, rising more than 1,000 feet into the air. It was as if a dense forest of hemp had suddenly sprouted where they stood. Gradually, the bodies of these heavenly ghosts began to sway, and slowly, they fell to the ground reluctantly. As their huge bodies fell, they smashed into the ground, causing countless grains of sand and dust to spray up into the air along with the gust of wind. With a flick of his sleeve, Wu Qi collected the 360,000 bolts shot by Huang Liang and the others. It was the first time he had seen 10,000 bone-piercing crossbows fired at once. Their lightning-fast speed and amazing penetrating power made Wu Qi's scalp go numb. Yet, these bone bolts, which were no more than 1 foot and 2 inches long, had easily penetrated the ground of the ghost realm, which was dozens of times harder than steel, for more than 3 miles. What an amazing destructive power! And, the soldiers who controlled the bone-piercing crossbows had not yet injected their own energies into the bolts. If a warrior whose cultivation base had reached the first Panga heaven or above had injected his Panga sacred energy into the bolts and fully activated the penetrating spell inscribed on the bolts, the penetrating power of the bolts would be increased by more than 100 times. It was no wonder that Dayu could besiege heaven immortals with ordinary soldiers. Sure enough, he had his reasons. After instructing Huang Liang and the others to stay alert in the sky and not show their faces, Wu Qi patted Ao Buzan on the head. Ao Buzan understood and let out a deafening dragon roar. Then, he transformed into a black dragon that was 1,000 feet long and as thick as a water tank. Dense watery clouds and black smoke rolled and tumbled under his feet, while his eyes shone with a golden gleam. 2 dragon whiskers, each hundreds of feet long, tore through the air and produced a shrill whistle. What a vigorous and ferocious divine dragon! Sitting on Ao Buzan's back, Wu Qi slowly pushed away the clouds and descended into the valley. He exercised the dragon kill and grew to about 100 feet tall. 2 dragon horns grew out of his forehead, and his skin was covered with pitch-black dragon scales. He wore only a blood-red cloak wrapped around his waist as a battle skirt. Surrounded by a raging dark flame, he descended in front of the heavenly ghosts, riding on Aobuzan. The hundreds of heavenly ghosts in the valley watched in horror as Wuqi and Aobuzan descended. A huge and ferocious dragon, a strange yet ferocious and evil dragon man, and the dragon python sisters, who had transformed into 20-feet-long dragon pythons and coiled around Wuqi's neck, looked no different from some ancient evil gods in the legends. Riding a black dragon, raising strange snakes, and covered in scales. What else could they be if not evil gods? Wuqi flicked his sleeve and pointed to the exit. The few heavenly ghosts looked at each other, then carefully followed Wuqi into the narrow passage and looked out of the valley. More than 1,000 heavenly ghosts were lying miserably on the ground, and their blood had formed a small lake on the ground. The few heavenly ghosts were so frightened that they screamed and ran back, scrambling to an old heavenly ghost who had a broken tail, an arm, and a leg, and stammered a few words. The old heavenly ghost was taken aback, then he raised his only arm, threw his head back and roared, and knelt down before Wuqi with hundreds of other heavenly ghosts. Speaking fluent human language, the old heavenly ghost kowtowed to Wuqi and said, "Your presence brings light to our humble dwelling. May I ask what business you have with me, and is there anything we can do to serve you?" Wuqi shuddered at the old heavenly ghost's fluent language, and his heart skipped a beat. How could this old fellow speak such a fluent human language? He even had a hint of Pangu continent's native accent. Wuqi cursed in his mind, "Damn it." Then, with a deep voice, he asked, "Are those people outside the valley your enemies?" As soon as Wuqi asked the question, the heavenly ghosts kneeling on the ground burst into tears at the same time. Chapter 751. Hundreds of heavenly ghosts, who were more than 100 feet tall and 300 feet long, and covered in bone spikes, were kneeling on the ground and wailing like kindergartners being bullied by their classmates. Wuqi stared blankly at the group of extremely emotional heavenly ghosts and shook his head blankly. Who said heavenly ghosts were a bunch of brainless creatures? Who said they knew nothing but killing and devouring? Who said they knew nothing but killing and devouring? Whoever made up these words should have their tongues cut out. Wuqi took a deep breath and jumped off Aobuzan's back as he looked at the heavenly ghosts in front of him, who were crying with rich expressions, the deep pain in their scarlet eyes, and felt the sorrow emanating from the bottom of their hearts. He helped the old heavenly ghost, who could speak fluent human language, to his feet and asked in a deep voice, "What injustice have you suffered? Tell me quickly, and I'll help you." Wuqi did not think that these heavenly ghosts were the terrible ones in the legends, the kind of ferocious creatures who coveted the flesh and blood of humans and cultivators and knew nothing but killing. These heavenly ghosts in front of him were not only sentient, but also possessed intelligence. They were affectionate, sentimental, and had their own social structure and division of labor. What was the difference between them and human beings? The heavenly ghosts outside the valley, on the other hand, were exactly the kind of heavenly ghosts in the legends. Wuqi did not feel any pressure to kill them. They were just a bunch of greedy and bloodthirsty beasts. The old heavenly ghost raised his head and began to tell Wuqi the story of his clan while crying. In the ghost realm, during the apocalypse of heaven and earth, many almighty experts had broken a piece of Pangu continent. This piece of land, measuring trillions of miles in circumference, had flown into the depths of the starry sky and merged with the first wisp of innate ghost energy since the creation of heaven and earth, thus forming the ghost realm, a unique domain that struck terror into the hearts of the outside world. There were countless corpses of almighty experts on this piece of land. Nourished by the innate ghost energy, these corpses gradually evolved into the first batch of heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm. Because of the ghost energy's greedy nature of devouring, these heavenly ghosts were ferocious and bloodthirsty, and loved to plunder blood and food. Their instinct was to kill and devour. But, after countless eons of evolution, generations of heavenly ghosts were born in the ghost realm, and among them, many brilliant geniuses emerged. These geniuses comprehended the supreme Tao of heaven and earth, from which they comprehended the cultivation path of the heavenly ghosts. From relying on instinct to devour everything to strengthen their own cultivation base, they gradually evolved to relying on self-cultivation to improve their cultivation base. With the growth of their cultivation base, the intelligence of the heavenly ghosts also became higher and higher. Those heavenly ghosts with stronger cultivation bases could gradually eliminate the trace of ferocious aura brought about by their innate nature. These powerful ghost cultivators possessed extremely high intelligence and great power. They established their own territories in the 9 Nether Ghost realm and gradually evolved into the famous 13 great heavenly ghost kings and 800 ghost saints of the 9 Nether Ghost realm. The 13 great heavenly ghost kings were experienced primordial immortals, while the 800 ghost sages were all peak-level gold immortals. It was even rumored that some of them had long since broken through the bottleneck of primordial immortals and attained primordial golden bodies. Relying on the unique geographical environment of the ghost realm, these 13 great heavenly ghost kings and 800 ghost sages dominated a region. Even those lofty figures of the celestial court who tried to control everything in their hands could do nothing to these powerful existences. Once, a primordial immortal from the celestial court invaded the ghost realm and tried in vain to make the 13 great heavenly ghost kings obey the edict of the celestial court. But, the primordial immortal and the subsequent waves of reinforcements were all defeated by the 13 great heavenly ghost kings. If it had not been for the interference of unknown existences, the celestial court would have lost at least a few celestial emperors in that battle. The direct ancestor of the branch of heavenly ghosts in front of Wu Qi was also a genius. Born in a small clan in the ghost realm, he had attained the strength close to the peak-level gold immortal through hard cultivation, and had established his own foundation in the ghost realm, gradually gaining a powerful force. But, whether it was the human world or the ghost realm, all kinds of melodramatic plots were happening all the time and everywhere that Wu Qi found extremely melodramatic. Because of his handsome and charming appearance, this newly born expert in the ghost realm caught the eye of a female ghost sage from the neighboring territory, who sent him a powerful invitation to perform dual cultivation with him. Now that a ghost sage who had awed the ghost realm for countless years had taken a fancy to him, according to common sense, this ancestor should have happily washed himself and sent himself to the ghost sage's bed. But something happened that made Wu Qi want to vomit blood. This ancestor was the only infatuated person in the entire ghost realm since the creation of the world. Infatuated people naturally had to do things that were infatuated with love. This ancestor had just given birth to a litter of young children with his lover, so how could he care less about the ghost sage's invitation? Instead, he was enraged for his beauty and led his army to attack the ghost saint's territory. The female ghost sage felt that her face had been mercilessly trampled on, so she was also furious. She called a few ghost sages who were on good terms with her to join forces and wipe out the ancestor's army. They beat the ancestor into ashes and divided up his territory. Only the great ancestor's lover escaped with their family of 80 young children. They did not dare to stay in the territory of the ghostly sages. Instead, they fled to the most desolate countryside in the world of ghosts and souls to settle down. This branch of heavenly ghosts had secretly settled down here. As the saying goes, cut their way through brambles and thorns, struggled hard against countless fierce monsters, and paid a lot of sweat and blood. After several generations of development, they finally had a population of more than 3,000. Wu Qi could not help but be shocked when he heard this. A litter of 80 young children. It was said that heavenly ghosts had an amazing reproductive ability, but how could they give birth to 80 children in one litter? It suddenly dawned on Wu Qi why the legendary almighty expert strictly forbade heavenly ghosts from developing their territories outside the ghost realm. If dozens of heavenly ghosts were allowed to sneak into outer heavenly realms, it would not take many years for the entire outer heavenly realms to be filled with heavenly ghosts, according to the way they multiplied. Then, to Wu Qi's surprise, after several generations of reproduction, these heavenly ghosts had only produced a population of about 3,000. It was obvious that it was not easy to survive in this wilderness. However, only a few hundred people were left out of the original 3,000. Could it be related to the heavenly ghosts outside? Sobbing, the old heavenly ghost continued to tell Wu Qi about the history of the development of his clan. As Wu Qi expected, when this clan of heavenly ghosts was flourishing, a large clan of heavenly ghosts with a population of 10,000 suddenly moved to a place less than 300 miles away from them. On top of that, they were the primitive heavenly ghosts, the most troublesome species in the realm. In terms that Wu Qi was familiar with, these so-called primitive heavenly ghosts were uncivilized savages, cannibals, and the like. These heavenly ghosts were just born naturally in the ghost realm. They were either born from the corpses of dead heavenly ghosts, or from the bodies of all kinds of dead creatures. They were born ferocious and barbaric, and never listened to any reason. Primitive heavenly ghosts had no intelligence. Once, a powerful heavenly ghost cultivator had slaughtered hundreds of millions of primitive heavenly ghosts and dissected their bodies, only to find that all of them had brains the size of walnuts, and it was impossible for them to have any intelligence. Only after generations of evolution could they produce a few intelligent geniuses, and only then would these primitive heavenly ghosts embark on the path of pursuing the heavenly Tao and constantly strengthening themselves. It was unknown what kind of powerful monster these primitive heavenly ghosts had come from, but their overall strength was even stronger than the heavenly ghosts in the valley who had cultivated. Since the first encounter between the two sides, these primitive heavenly ghosts had regarded the heavenly ghosts in the valley as their prey. They did not come for flesh and blood, but for the female heavenly ghosts in the valley. Hunting and reproduction were the instincts of primitive heavenly ghosts, and they would seize any opportunity to reproduce and strengthen their clan. Therefore, when they discovered the valley, they had tried every means to capture the female heavenly ghosts in the valley. Caught off guard, the primitive heavenly ghosts had captured nearly 1,000 females, and the rest of their clansmen had been killed in the fight. Today, Wu Qi saw that the heavenly ghosts in the valley had only sent a few young men to hunt for food, while the rest of the 300 or so young men had gone to the enemy's lair, trying to find a chance to rescue some of their clansmen. In the end, instead of rescuing their clansmen, they attracted a large number of enemies. If Wu Qi had not killed more than 1,000 of the enemy's heavenly ghosts, all the heavenly ghosts in the valley would have starved to death if they had stayed in the valley. In the outside world, the summoned heavenly ghosts could devour the natural energy to replenish themselves, so they did not need to eat. But in the ghost realm, although the air was filled with rich innate ghost energy, which was the source of all heavenly ghosts, it could not fill the stomachs of fully formed heavenly ghosts. They had to hunt and devour food. Only by devouring food could they gradually refine the innate ghost energy with the help of the food's blood essence and aura, making themselves stronger and stronger. Even the 13 great heavenly ghost kings had to devour huge amounts of food to sustain their lives in the ghost realm, let alone these heavenly ghosts in the valley, who were relatively weak in comparison. After understanding the ins and outs of the matter, Wu Qi stroked his chin as he looked at the heavenly ghosts in front of him, and he could not help but have some bad thoughts. There were 80 of them in one birth, and the newborn heavenly ghosts were already very strong. They could travel freely through the void and spit out vicious ghost fire. Among them, there was no lack of talented people who could cultivate to the realm of gold immortal and primordial immortal. They were a great source of soldiers. As long as their population was carefully controlled and their family planning was carried out, Wu Qi did not mind having an army of heavenly ghosts under his command. Especially since these heavenly ghosts had been living in the ghost realm all day long without seeing the light of day, they would surely suffer from mental illness. How merciful and virtuous it would be to bring them to Pangu continent and let them see the blue sky, the white clouds, the fresh flowers, and the green grass. He had to think of a way to trick these heavenly ghosts into his hands. After pondering for a moment, Wu Qi suddenly stamped his foot and roared furiously, "They are simply lawless. How dare those primitive heavenly ghosts do this? Lead the way now, and I'll wipe them out for you right now. Kill all the males and bring all the females back to be your wives." The hundreds of heavenly ghosts kneeling in the valley were stunned, and then they jumped to their feet at the same time and let out deafening cheers. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.